Chapter 984. It's good that they didn't chase after us, it's good that they didn't chase after us. At this moment, Mu Tuo felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders, and he no longer looked like the brave general of World of Wara. Finally safe, Mu Tuo panted for a while before calming down. Then, he called a few of the Kiliarchs who escaped with him over and asked, "How many enemies do you think there are this time?" "About 20,000, I think." A straightforward Chiliarch blurted out without thinking. As soon as he said that, Mu Tuo's face showed a very serious expression, and he seemed a little unhappy. "I think there are at least 40,000. Another Chiliarch noticed the change in Mu Tuo's expression and quickly expressed his opinion. "I think there are 70 to 80,000, or else how could our 30,000 army be defeated so quickly?" As soon as the number of 40,000 was mentioned, another Chiliarch voiced a different opinion. Until now, Mu Tuo's expression became a lot friendlier. "I think there are about 70 to 80,000. We fought for 2 days and 2 nights in this battle, and in the end, we damaged more than 50,000 of the enemy's cavalry. After that, we still had to retreat because we didn't have enough troops. Isn't that right, everyone?" This was a blatant lie. Mu Tuo's usual personality was not like this, but he could not explain himself to Yes Hen after being defeated, so this was the only way he could come up with to explain everything. This way, not only would he not be at fault, but he would also be rewarded. The general had set the tone, and the other Kiliarchs did not want to be implicated by the defeat, so after a slight hesitation, everyone agreed to this fabricated fact. Soon, they called the Kiliarchs and Centurions to agree on the same statement. A great defeat was described as a great victory, and this was considered a kind of art of war. Outside the beginning city, the attack was still ongoing. This was already the 12th consecutive siege. After being heavily damaged by the large-scale destruction weapons on the first day of the siege, the infantry commander General Korban changed his attack strategy. Each time, he would send at most 2,000 men to each side of the city wall, and with such a scale, both sides fought back and forth, with no clear winner. There were even a few times when they almost reached the top of the city wall. Under the repeated hope, Korban grew more and more tormented between hope and disappointment. When he had nothing else to do, he made a conclusion and was surprised to discover a fact. The defense of the 5-star army seemed to be sometimes strong and sometimes weak. Every 3 days, the defense would weaken, and then it would strengthen day by day. On the 4th day, there would be another fact that the defense would become weak and strong. Korban could not understand why things had turned out this way. The only thing he could do was to continue attacking the city, paying a heavy price while trying to whittle away at the enemy's strength. Didn't the scout already say that? The enemy in the beginning city only had 40,000 soldiers. Even if he had to sacrifice 2 or even 3 of them, the final victory would still belong to him. Korban's is a good idea. But he did not know that the reason why he felt that the defense was strong and weak was because the soldiers guarding the city changed every 3 days. In the 12th day of the siege, the 5-star army had changed 4 batches of veteran soldiers, and the new soldiers who had experienced the 3-day siege had completed the process of metamorphosing into veterans, and then reported to the new Second Army. And from start to finish, the new Second Army's main force had not been mobilized. Unable to know the specific situation in the city, Korban could only probe again and again. Then, another 10 days passed, and the 5-star army defending the city was still weak and strong at times, and no one could find the reason. Korban, however, was surprised to find that he only had 10,000 men left. After 22 days of siege, the original 50,000 soldiers were either dead or injured, and now there were only 10,000 who were healthy. He finally had to find Prime Minister Alip and ask for reinforcements. He did not expect the Korban to be so difficult to attack. At first, he said that he would take the outer city in 3 days, but it had only been 3 days, and not only had he not taken it, but he also did not have enough soldiers to attack the city. This made Alip very unhappy, but he could not think of a better way at the moment, so he had no choice but to replace the 20,000 cavalry with infantry and hand them over to Korban. Just as Alip was done with this, another message came, and the 30,000 cavalry sent by the Wara had returned. But only 5,000 of the 30,000 returned, which meant that they might have been defeated when they attacked North Desert City. Muther had returned. He could have returned a few days earlier, but in order to show that he had indeed fought a hard battle with the 5-star army, he deliberately delayed it. This time, he was summoned by Yeshen for questioning as soon as he returned to the camp. What happened? I gave you 30,000 cavalry, and you only brought back 5,000 men. I want an explanation. Yeshen's eyes were cold, and if Muther answered wrong, he would raise his butcher's knife and start a massacre. Thinking that it was fortunate that he had prepared in advance, Muther tried his best to act as calm as possible and told the lie that he had made up earlier. After he was done, he even put on a mournful expression and said, "Lord Leader, this is all because the scouts' information was not good. That's why we suffered such heavy losses." 80,000 5-star army, where did they come from? Yeshen, who was frowning after hearing Muther's explanation, was also stunned. Since when did North Desert City have so many 5-star army? If that was the case, 30,000 against 80,000, and 5,000 managed to escape after wiping out 50,000 of the enemy's cavalry, it was not a small victory. I don't know. Mutuo shook his head innocently. Then, according to what he thought before, he pretended to be aggrieved and said, "Leader, do you think the war god has transferred the main army to North Desert City and left some infantry in the beginning city?" Oh. As the saying goes, one sentence can wake a person from a dream. He was instantly woken up by such a sentence. Thinking about it carefully, this idea was not unreasonable. More importantly, there was no other explanation other than this. Okay, I understand. I will immediately meet with Apu and tell him the details. In order to shirk responsibility, Muther came up with this excuse to facilitate Yeshen and Apu's meeting again, and at the same time, it sped up the destruction of the allied army. In the main tent, Yeshen invited Apu and told him what happened to Muther, as well as his conjecture. "Prime Minister, it seems that our previous estimation was wrong. The cavalry of the 5-star army is not in the beginning city. They only left behind infantry. This can also explain why we failed to attack the city and why we were defeated when we sent troops to North Desert City." Yeshen's words were reasonable, and the smart Apu was also misled into making the same judgment. Yes, that should be the case. It's just that the walls of the beginning city are high and strong, even if they are infantry. What can we do if we can't break in? Seeing that Apu agreed with his judgment, Yeshen was very proud. In his eyes, Apu was very smart, and even he agreed with his judgment. There should be no 5-star army cavalry in the city. If that's the case, the previous military plan should also be changed. Prime Minister, this leader knows that you did your best, but as you said, when the war god built the beginning city, he probably considered the safety of the city, so it won't be easy to attack them. Since that's the case, we need to think of another way. Think of another way. Apu's expression didn't change, but he was very curious. But I don't know what the leader has in mind. I have some ideas, but I don't know if it will work or not. I still need to ask the Prime Minister to give me some pointers. Yeshen chuckled. He did have a bold idea, and he wanted to show it off in front of Apu. The leader's idea can't be wrong. I'd like to hear the details. Apu saw that Yeshen was keeping him in suspense, so he simply satisfied the other party's request and said these words with a pleading expression. Apu's attitude was so humble that Yeshen was full of pride. He immediately laughed and said, "This is what I think. Attacking the beginning city with ladders is far from enough. Since that's the case, it's better to go to Baiming and get some cannons. With the help of these cannons, attacking the beginning city will be twice the result with half the effort. When the beginning city is in danger, the 5-star army cavalry in North Desert City will have to reinforce them. At that time, we only need to attack them halfway, and our plan will be successful. The encirclement is fake, and attacking the reinforcements is real? Apu's brain turned very quickly, and he immediately pointed out the core of the problem. No. Attacking the reinforcements is real, and attacking the beginning city is also real. When the time comes, no matter which side makes progress, it will be our victory. Yeshen first shook his head, then nodded, and his eyes were full of smiles. This time, Apu didn't answer immediately. He was thinking about the feasibility of the matter. Thinking about the fact that they still had the advantage in terms of military strength, it was possible for them to start a war on both sides. Thus, he wanted to agree. However, there was a bigger problem in front of him. Will the Northern Ming army give us cannons? We don't want their cannons. Before, we found hundreds of cannons on the battlefield, but we didn't have enough ammunition. Now, we just want them to hand over the cannons. And we don't want them for free. We can trade with them. We can use the extra warhorses in the army to trade. This is what they need, so there won't be a problem. Yeshen said confidently. Warhorses for ammunition, but we don't have that many warhorses. As Arab spoke, he thought back to the 20,000 cavalry that he had just arranged to attack the city. Could it be that he had also planned to use his 20,000 warhorses first? Chapter 985. Yeshen chuckled and looked at Alip with ill intentions and said, Prime Minister, I heard that in order to capture the first city, you have ordered 20,000 cavalry to be converted into infantry. Doesn't that mean that you have 20,000 war horses? Of course, I won't take it for free. I've heard that there's a large horse farm in the south of the beginning city. There are hundreds of thousands of war horses in there. After we take down the city, I'll allow your army to pick 40,000 warhorses first. How about that? As if worried that Alip would not agree, Yeshen directly offered double the price and then looked at the other party with an expectant look. Yeshen believes that this price will be able to move the other party. Alip only pondered for a moment before he nodded and agreed. These 20,000 war horses are indeed useless now. If that's the case, it's better to take them out to make a deal. Once they succeed, they will get more. Moreover, he also hopes to get the help of artillery. Otherwise, he really doesn't know when they will be able to capture the first city. After convincing Alip, Yeshen called one of the 4 generals, Ting Shu, and asked him to take 10,000 people to Sanbuchuan City to make a deal. Remember, 20,000 war horses in exchange for all the artillery shells in the city. Yes, Prime Minister. But what if they don't trade with us? Ting Shu asked. Tell them that the artillery is used to deal with the first city. Now we are all grasshoppers on the same rope. If the 5-star army is fine this time, I'm afraid that they will inevitably come to the 5-star army to settle the score. If they don't want to see such a result, it's better for them to obediently make a deal with us. And if they are unmoved, tell them that we will ally with Yang Chendong. They can think about the consequences themselves. Yeshen pulled a long face and said in an unfriendly tone. Ting Shu left, but to his surprise, the deal went very smoothly. It's probably because the person in charge of Sanbuchuan City is now Deng Chang. Since the red barbarian cannons were no longer available, there was no need for him to keep the cannonballs. He might as well give them to the Ministry of Wara in exchange for war horses. The two sides were trading under the city gate. When the 20,000 horses were involved, it caused quite a commotion. Many people in Sanbuchuan knew about it. Shi Wanshan and the other generals also knew about it. However, they were under house arrest and couldn't do anything. The members of the security bureau in Sanbuchuan City heard about this matter. Considering the importance of this matter, they used the radio station to send the news to Shicheng. When Yang Chendong saw this news, Wang Shan not only sent this telegram, but also one about Hai Wu Division. He Gong, the commander of the 5th Division of the Navy's Cold Front, called. They had already passed through the Liaodu area and were now heading towards the first city. It's better to come at the right time. Yang Chendong looked at the telegram, which could be described as timely rain, and laughed heartily. Since the other party wanted to play with firearms, then he would let everyone know who the originator of firearms was. In front of Shicheng, Yeshen and Ali Pu began to mobilize their troops. Each of them sent out 50,000 cavalry. A total of 100,000 cavalry were stationed in the northwest of Shicheng. They were waiting for the arrival of the 5-star Army's main cavalry. But at the same time, thousands of miles away in the south, a force of 6,000 cavalry appeared in the Shirha River in the north of Ili. They were carrying the banner of the 5-star Army, with General Narasong as their commander. They were quietly crossing the river. This was a surprise attack that Yang Chendong had arranged before the war. They crossed the mountains and came to the periphery of Ili from another direction. Next, they would launch an iron-blooded attack to take revenge for Ali Pu's attack on Shicheng. The telegram operator put away the telegram, came to Narasong and saluted. Deputy Division Commander Narasong, the 6th young master has called. He agreed to let us enter Ili and attack their hinterland. He asked us to create enough momentum. Call back the 6th young master. We promise to complete the mission. Na Raizong laughed excitedly. He turned around to look at the cavalry troops crossing the river and shouted, "Brothers, let's work harder. In at most 2 days, we will be able to pull out our sabers and slaughter them all." Saihan Mountain. This mountain was once the dividing line between the 5-star Army and the Baiming Army. Ever since the allied forces of Walla and Ili appeared, it became an abandoned land. Looking from afar, one could still see the desolate appearance of the mountain. "General, should we rest here for a night before continuing? Our brothers are tired from being so careful." A chilly arch walked to General Teng Shu with a fawning expression. Teng Shu rode on his horse and looked at the continuous drizzle above his head. When he saw the carriages loaded with cannonballs moving in a small line, he nodded. "That's good too. Our brothers have been rushing through the night for the past few days and are indeed tired. Let's let everyone have a good night's rest. However, pass down the order that the waterproofing of the carriages must be done well. We must not allow water to enter the cannonballs." "General, don't worry." "Thank you, General." The chilly arch thanked him happily. Then, he went down to pass down the military order. For a moment, cheers could be heard from the 10,000 troops. They were not afraid of rushing through the journey. However, they were worried about carrying gunpowder that could explode if they were not careful. Seeing that they were about to reach the first city and with the continuous drizzle, they might as well stop and have a good rest. They would continue to move forward when the weather cleared up. After the general gave the order to rest, the cavalry soldiers took out their tents. White tents sprung up like bamboo shoots after the rain at the foot of Saihan Mountain. The 5-star Army had originally built a road here. As the roadbed was higher than the ground, it would not be a problem even if it drizzled. Therefore, it became a good place for the Walla cavalry to rest. Just as the tents appeared one after another, 2 scouts from the 5-star Army who were hiding in the distance quietly retreated and reported the news to their commander, Ding Shan. When the first city was closed, Ding Shan and the scouting group he led did not enter the city. Instead, they stayed outside and were responsible for gathering all the information outside. When the 5th Marine Division appeared on the grassland, Commander Ding Shan personally led people to welcome them and pulled them into an extremely safe jungle. Now, Ding Shan and the commander of the 5th Marine Division, He Gong, stood in the temporary military tent and looked at the map. They were thinking about how to complete the mission given by the 6th young master. The 5th Marine Division was an army fully equipped with firearms. It had 4 regiments and 1 division under its command, totaling 8,400 people. Because when He Gong received the order, he was still maintaining the security of the Korean province. When he came, he left the 4 regiments behind. However, even if there were only 3 regiments and 1 division, the strength of their combat power was still shocking. Speaking of which, the Navy's Cold Front Division and the Army's Cold Front Division both had their own merits. For example, the Army's Cold Front Division was required to learn how to ride a horse in addition to fighting on land. On the other hand, the Navy's Cold Front Division was required to know how to swim in addition to fighting on land. However, it was undeniable that both sides had good abilities in fighting on land. After receiving the mission from the telegram to eliminate the 10,000 cavalry sent by the Walla to collect gunpowder, He Gong had been waiting for an opportunity to appear. If the Walla cavalry were all on horseback, it wouldn't be easy to annihilate them all without any signs of life. And once a large number of cavalries escape, I don't know if Commander Ding Shan can stop them. In the tent, He Gong asked Ding Shan with a serious face. Although he wanted to say that he would do his best, but there was no room for carelessness in war. Ding Shan could only shake his head. Commander He, our scouting group only has 2,000 people. If it is within this number, we are confident that we can stop them. But if too many of them escape, I'm afraid there is nothing we can do. I see. He Gong took a deep breath. Then if we want to complete the mission, we can only wait for them to stop. Although He Gong said that, he did not have much confidence in his heart. After all, 4 hours ago, he received news that the Walla cavalry was about to arrive at Mount Saihan. From there to the outskirts of Beginning City, it would only take more than a day's journey if they hurried. Perhaps in order to return to camp as soon as possible, they would not stop at all and would not create the most suitable opportunity for him to annihilate the enemy. He Gong thought about how the 6th young master had high hopes for Hai Wushi. If he couldn't complete the mission well, how would he have the face to meet the 6th young master again? He Gong's gaze fell on the map again. For the sake of the mission, he had no choice but to take the risk. Report. At this moment, the newly sent scout outside the tent returned with the latest news. Teng Shu's 10,000 cavalries and dozens of carriages of artillery shells had stopped at the foot of Mount Saihan due to the continuous rain. They stopped? After hearing the report, He Gong's eyes lit up with excitement. Then, he laughed and said, "Good, good, it's good that they stopped. Commander Ding, it's time for us to show our skills." "That's right, Commander He. Everything will go according to the previous plan." Ding Shan was also very excited. Cavalries were afraid of moving. If that happened, it would be too difficult to lock onto the target, increasing the difficulty of annihilating them all together. However, if they stopped, everything would be another story. A division commander and a commander immediately ordered the troops to set off. Their target was the foot of Mount Saihan. At the foot of Mount Saihan, the 10,000 cavalries led by Teng Shu did not know that they had become the target and prey. The light rain outside had turned into moderate rain. After rushing for days, the moment the tents were set up, they rested inside. Many of them had even slept during the day. As the general leading the troops, Teng Shu did not have the intention to reprimand them. The soldiers were working very hard, and it was good to have a chance to rest more. Moreover, this place was not far from Beginning City. He had 10,000 cavalries, so he did not think that there would be any danger in resting here. Even if the 5-star army appeared, he would still be able to fight back. Moreover, there was no information that indicated that the main force of the 5-star army would be here, so he had nothing to worry about. Chapter 986. In the rain, the C5 Division soldiers dressed in the same raincoats appeared near Mount Saihan according to plan. The heavy rain increased the secrecy of their movements, but at the same time, it also increased the difficulty of their march. They wore rain boots and raincoats to keep the rain off their heads. 3 regiments and 1 battalion, more than 6,000 soldiers arrived at the foot of the mountain according to the original plan. They could already see the resting Walla camp from afar. "Commander, they didn't discover our presence. Can we continue with the plan?" A company commander in charge of reconnaissance came to He Gong and asked for instructions. Yes, order the 5 battalions of the 1st Regiment to spread out in different directions toward the enemy camp. The 2nd and 3rd Regiments, plus the battalions, stay at the periphery and eliminate any enemies that escape. In addition, go and inform Commander Ding Shan. Tell him to make preparations. We must not let any fish escape the net. He Gong nodded his head with a dignified expression. Whether or not they could complete the 6th young master's mission depended on this. The regiment that received the order began to rapidly approach the target in the rain. They first crept closer to the enemy camp. When they were only 300 meters away, they could still see clearly even in the rain. Then, they switched to the standard military movement and slowly approached the enemy camp. How to approach the target as close as possible without disturbing the enemy was something that every cold warrior had to do. All kinds of military movements were skillfully carried out one by one. The distance between them and the enemy camp was getting closer and closer. When they were only 200 meters away from the enemy camp, the 95 style in their hands could completely unleash a powerful effect. Only then did they stop one by one. Then, they spread out in a long snake formation. The 2,000 soldiers were divided into 5 groups and surrounded most of the enemy camp's tents. Among them, the area near the carriages was the closest. Prepare the rocket launchers. Dozens of carriages were about 100 meters away from them. From time to time, they could see Walla cavalry patrolling the surroundings. A regiment commander issued an order, but the rain covered his voice. The sound of the rain could cover up the voices of the people, but it couldn't cover up the earth-shattering explosion that followed. A single rocket launcher streaked across the rain and hit one of the transport carriages. The fire exploded, and under the chain reaction, the gunpowder in the carriages was ignited one after another. One after another, huge roars and explosions were heard. Amidst the sky full of explosions, the carriages were torn apart. With the support of enough gunpowder, a corner of the entire camp was instantly flattened. It was estimated that at least a few hundred Vola cavalry nearby were directly swallowed up. At least a few thousand warhorses were startled and began to run wildly in all directions. Even if there were tents set up in front of them, they couldn't stop them from running wildly. In the process, who knew how many tents were overturned, and who knew how many Vola cavalry who came out of the camp to check out the situation were trampled over. Chaos began. Attack! The first leader gave the order, and the 5 fire dragons began their one-sided massacre. Those Walla cavalry who came out of the camp in panic became targets one by one. They were hit by bullets, and blood spilled on the ground. Outside, there were horses roaring and rampaging. Inside, there were bullets passing by, taking away people's lives. Teng Shu, who was in the main tent, panicked. At this moment, his face was pale, and he looked nervous. He suddenly reached out and grabbed a captain who was running in front of him and asked, "What's going on? What happened?" "General, I don't know, everything is a mess, a mess." Mrs. Qian's face was full of panic. The fire just now was too dazzling. Under the deafening sound, her ears were still a little deaf, and she couldn't hear what others were saying. Don't panic, the explosives are destroyed. This is clearly done by the 5-star army. We have to find a way to kill our way out and tell the leader about this. In this way, gather the cavalry. Their main force is either blocked in the first city or North Desert City. It is impossible for any army to appear here. Teng Shu was worthy of being one of the 4 generals chosen by Walla. Soon, he became clear-headed, and then he kept shouting to reorganize the army's morale. The most important thing for an army was the stability of the army's morale. As long as the morale of the army was still there, they would have the power to fight and have the possibility of turning defeat into victory. Teng Shu's shout quickly gathered several captains, dozens of captains, and a cavalry team of 5,000 to 6,000 people began to gather. When these people found their horses and stood with their swords, Teng Shu, as the main general, didn't have the slightest hesitation, and he didn't have the intention to wait for the others. He looked at the direction of the first city and swung his sword. The target is the first city, all troops attack. A regiment of cold front warriors used a surprise attack to stop the enemy that was twice their number. When nearly 6,000 Walla cavalry rushed out of the camp, the real resistance began. With Commander Higong as the head, the 2nd Regiment, the 3rd Regiment, and the division's battalion, a total of 4,400 people appeared in front of Teng Shu. Just like the direction of Teng Shu's attack was the first city, the direction of Higong's defense was also the direction of the first city. The two sides inevitably met, and then there was a burst of gunfire. One by one, the Walla cavalry were overturned from their horses and were hit by bullets. Their bodies were stained with blood. The brave and good cavalry didn't even see the shadow of their opponents. They fell from their horses and went to see the Tengri that they believed in. The sound of gunfire burst out, and the cavalry fell on the charging road with blood. However, at least half of the cavalry rushed out of the encirclement. This was the advantage of the cavalry. Their speed was extremely fast, especially when they had a clear target. They could completely ignore the blockade of guns and rush out. Fortunately, Commander Higong had already anticipated this possibility. Higong had set up a total of 3 blockades. Just now, the enemy only broke through the 2nd Regiment's blockade. Then, the cavalry rushed out and met the 3rd Regiment's soldiers. Gunfire sounded again and countless lives were lost. Under the 2nd blockade, more than 3,000 cavalry left half of the corpses. When they rushed to the 3rd blockade, Teng Shu had less than 2,000 cavalry with him. Commander Higong didn't hesitate to lead the division's battalion to open fire. Among them, there were as many as 6 machine guns. They formed a bullet net and blocked the direction of the enemy's advance. One of the machine guns was aimed at Teng Shu and his warhorse. Unlike the clash between cavalry, Teng Shu had close to 100 bodyguards around him. They could very well protect the commander's safety. However, under such a blockade of gunfire, the effect of the bodyguards was negligible. Especially after the cavalry formation was disrupted one after another, there were not many bodyguards who could block in front of Teng Shu. When faced with the gunfire of the 95 machine gun, this one of the 4 generals that Yes Hen thought highly of was locked on by the gun muzzle. The bullets mercilessly shot into his body, causing Teng Shu, who was still lying on the horse, to tremble involuntarily. Just like the old saying, no matter how good one's martial arts were, one was still afraid of a kitchen knife. In the face of bullets that were many times more lethal than kitchen knives and bullets, the so-called kung fu became a joke. There wasn't even time for you to show off your knife skills. General Teng Shu was shot and fell off the horse. Even at the last moment before his death, his gaze was still looking in the direction of First City. His eyes were filled with unwillingness. Teng Shu was dead, but there were still many cavalry who rushed out of the blockade. There were about 1,000 of them. Their lives would be left to the reconnaissance group at the last layer of defense. The leader of the reconnaissance group, Ding Shan, had already gathered 2,000 soldiers under his command and was ready for battle. When he saw nearly 1,000 panicked enemy cavalry rushing out, he did not hesitate to wave his sword to meet them. The final massacre began. Those who could become scouts were originally outstanding talents in the army. It was no exaggeration to say that in order to gather the 2,000 people of the reconnaissance group, Ding Shan's efforts were no less than that of Division Commander Tian Hu of the 1st Cavalry Division. Therefore, when the morale, ability, individual quality, and number of soldiers were inferior, the result of 2,000 against less than 1,000 was already destined. The 3-3 military formation played a great role. One by one, the Walla cavalry was entangled, surrounded, and killed. After more than 2 hours, the battlefield returned to calm. The 10,000 Walla cavalry, under the strict military plan, did not escape in the end. According to the previous agreement, they still had important things to do next. He Gong and others did not need to take captives, so some of the injured and some of the surrendered Walla cavalry would eventually face a result that they had to face whether they wanted to or not, and that was death. Not a single one of the 10,000 Vala cavalry managed to escape. Even the General Teng Shu died in battle. Division Commander He Gong and Commander Ding Shan looked at the expected result. The two of them breathed a sigh of relief. In the end, they did not disappoint the sixth young master's hope and completed the mission. Okay, immediately send power to the sixth young master. The matter is done, we will continue to complete the mission according to the plan. After giving the order to the electrical operator, He Gong looked at Ding Shan and said, Commander Ding, the uniforms and other things are ready, right? It's all ready. Ding Shan stood at attention and replied. Good, then we will proceed according to the plan. He Gong nodded and began to instruct the soldiers to dig a large hole. This time, it was not an easy task to bury 10,000 enemy corpses. More importantly, while burying the corpses, they had to mix in some of the Northern Ming Army's uniforms. That's right, they had to frame the Walla army and create a false impression that the Baiming army was the doing of the Walla army to destroy their so-called alliance. The rain continued for 2 days and 1 night, and finally, it cleared up again. The attack under the beginning city began again. After a series of unsuccessful attacks, Korban helplessly went to Prime Minister Arip and asked him where the Baiming army's red coat cannons were transported to. Chapter 987. Alip then went to the Walla army's main tent and met with Chief Yeshen. Chief, the beginning city's walls are high and sturdy. If it weren't for the heavy weapons, we wouldn't have been able to fight this battle. But I wonder where the Northern Ming artillery shells that we need have been transported to? Prime Minister, I'm also worried about this matter. Yeshen said with an ugly expression. According to General Teng Shu's previous report, they should have arrived at the barracks yesterday. However, due to the rain, they might have arrived a day or 2 later. But it doesn't matter. Now that the rain has stopped and I've sent out a team to receive them, the shells should arrive at the barracks soon. When that time comes, I'll inform you immediately. How about that? Seeing Yeshen's words, Alip couldn't force him anymore. He could only nod. Alright, since that's the case, I'll wait here for your good news. There will definitely be good news, Yeshen said confidently. But soon, news came that the cavalry had gone to receive them. However, even after rushing to the foot of Saihan Mountain, they still didn't see anyone. That's impossible. When the news was reported to the main tent, Yeshen's eyes flashed with worry, but he would never admit it. You must have gone the wrong way and missed General Teng Shu. How about this? Send more people to search. Search inch by inch. Don't let go of any suspicious places. After many years of leading troops, Yeshen knew very well what it meant to have an accident on the battlefield. However, Teng Shu had 10,000 cavalrymen with him. How could he disappear without a trace? There must be a problem somewhere. The facts soon proved Yeshen's guess. After the scouts received the order, they searched carefully and found that the soil at the foot of Saihan Mountain was very loose. With suspicion, they dug up the soil and revealed the corpses of the 10,000 cavalry soldiers. The news was quickly reported to Yeshen. He was shocked and asked someone to invite Alip to discuss the matter. After all, the other party had sacrificed 20,000 war horses. An explanation had to be given. After Prime Minister Alip received the news, he quickly came to Yeshen's main tent. As soon as he entered, he lost his usual calmness and asked anxiously, Chief, what happened? I heard that General Teng Shu and the others are in danger. Yes. Yeshen lowered his head. His face was heavy with anger. What's going on? We spent 20,000 war horses to exchange for those shells. Alip saw Yeshen admit everything and questioned him. This time, he had been waiting for these cannons to be used as an emergency. Now that he was told that there were no more, what was he supposed to do next? Seeing that Apu wanted to condemn him, he raised his head and said with a displeased expression, "Prime Minister, please remember, not only did we lose 10,000 horses, we also lost 10,000 cavalrymen. In terms of losses, our losses are much greater than yours." When Yes Hen got angry, Alip realized that there was something wrong with his attitude. His tone softened a lot. "Yes, I deeply sympathize with your heavy losses. But what's going on? No matter what, there needs to be an explanation. That was 10,000 cavalry soldiers. How could they be wiped out just like that? What's more, no one came back. This is too abnormal. It's indeed abnormal." Yes Hen agreed with this point of view. Then he asked with a trace of suspicion, "Prime Minister, do you think it was done by the 5-star army?" 5-star army? Alip was stunned at first, then he shook his head and said, "Didn't we already confirm that their main force is in the direction of North Desert City and Beginning City? How could they have the strength to arrange an ambush in the south of Beginning City? If they really have such great ability, then why would they defend the city? I don't think so." Alip was a smart person. Normally, he wouldn't directly express his opinion on some things. But as long as he understood the situation in front of him, he could see that the 5-star army was already weakened. They didn't have the strength to fight back. He wasn't the only one who thought this. Yes Hen also had the same idea. It's just that he couldn't think of any other reason, so he just casually probed. When he heard Alip's answer, he nodded and said, "Yes, the 5-star army shouldn't have the strength to do so. Although the 10,000 cavalry soldiers led by Teng Shu weren't the most elite force, they weren't just for show. To kill all of them without leaving a single one alive, it would take several times the number of soldiers. The 5-star army doesn't have the strength to do so." After eliminating the possibility of the 5-star army committing the crime, Alip and Yes Hen separately thought of another force, which was the Baiming army. Comparatively speaking, Saihan Mountain wasn't far from Tulu City. They had also heard that the 200,000 reinforcements of the Baiming army had arrived from the capital. Could it be that they suddenly attacked and killed Teng Shu and the others? Although they were allies now, when there was a conflict of interests, anything could happen. That was 10,000 Walla cavalry with 10,000 warhorses. In addition, there were so many artillery shells. It wouldn't be strange for them to do anything. As the saying goes, there are no eternal enemies or friends, only eternal interests. For the sake of interests, who could say for sure what the Baiming army would do? Just when the two smart people had their suspicions, but they still lacked evidence. The scout who had gone to investigate the corpses had returned with the evidence they wanted. It was a small number of Baiming army uniforms found in the graves. But because the enemy was afraid of leaving evidence behind, they had set the bodies on fire. Even the corpses were in tatters and it was impossible to see how they had died. Even the Baiming army uniforms were in the hands of the Walla cavalry, leaving behind some evidence and hope. Bastard, I didn't think they really did it. Yes Hen angrily slammed his fist on the wooden table in front of him. He had already guessed before, and now that there was evidence, he no longer doubted it. Alip was also angry. Although it didn't seem right that the Baiming army would take such a huge risk for 10,000 warhorses, the reality was that the facts were right. However, the truth was right there, and he had no choice but to believe it. Then there was a problem. The Baiming army had already made a move behind them, so they were no longer safe. Between the Baiming army and the 5-star army, they could be attacked from both sides at any time. If that was the case, they had to take action. Otherwise, it would be too late once the situation was settled. What should we do? Do we still need to send people to Tulu City to investigate the situation? Yes Hen asked conservatively. Tulu City has been sealed off for a long time. Our people couldn't get in before, and now something like this has happened. Even if they could get in, they probably wouldn't let them out. This kind of investigation is meaningless. Apu shook his head. With his foresight, he believed that all investigations were unnecessary. On the contrary, doing this would only delay the army's retreat. That's right, then what should we do? Retreat? When he said this, Yeshen's voice carried a hint of unease. We will retreat. But before we leave, we have to take some things with us. I've already sent people to check. Some of the more than 300,000 mu of grain fields in the north of the origin city have already ripened. If we move fast enough, we can still snatch some of it. This way, we can solve the problem of our own lack of food and fodder and also deal a heavy blow to the origin city. We can make them fall into a food shortage in a short period of time and delay their development. Apu said with some reluctance. Since it was confirmed that the first city was difficult to capture, even if they went to the North Desert City, it would be a risky move. They could only take a step back and snatch what they could first. This was the best way and the only thing they could do. Although he had brought a lot of provisions this time, the more life-saving things he had, the better. Thus, he immediately nodded. I agree with this idea. Then let's do it like this. We will send 10,000 cavalry to snatch the food. We will only give them 7 days. As for how much they can snatch, it all depends on their ability. How about it? Well, after we snatch our own food, we will burn the rest that we can't take away. In any case, we can't leave it to the 5-star army. Alip added. That's good. Well, using these 7 days, we can also transfer all the cavalry back from the northwest line and get ready to retreat at any time. Yeshen said this, and he had already confirmed everyone's decision to retreat. A thunderous siege operation was destined to end in failure. After the two leaders reached a consensus, they each sent 10,000 cavalry to the food base in the north of the first city. But the next thing didn't go well. Facing the yellow food, they actually had difficulty moving forward. This didn't refer to how many 5-star army were guarding here, it was because there were too many mines. They only advanced 2 or 3 miles and each of them paid the price of hundreds of cavalry. According to the report, there seemed to be a lot of mines buried in the ground that could throw their soldiers into the air. If they wanted to go all the way, they were afraid that it was far from being able to do it in a short time. When the news came back, Yeshen and Alip both scolded Yang Chendong's cunning. Obviously, this was a trap that should have been set up long ago, but because they wanted to wait for the food to mature, they ignored it. If we can't get it, then let's destroy it. Don't we still have some explosives and catapults? Drive them over and blow it to the ground. With the idea of both sides suffering, Yeshen made a ruthless move. Chapter 988. This kind of thankless work, if it was in the past, Aper would never do it. He was a politician, and he valued the overall situation more. He valued how much he could get in return for his efforts. There was no point in doing things like this where he could not get anything even if he put in a lot of effort. It's just that they didn't get any benefits from the battle of the first city. On the contrary, the original 50,000 siege infantry were almost wiped out. Since they couldn't take down the city, they needed an explanation. Then, let's destroy it. Alip made this difficult decision and arranged for people to do it. But before he gave the order, a new information was sent to him. This made Aper, who didn't change his expression even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, turn pale with fright. He finally didn't dare to think about other things and decided to leave immediately. Once again, he came to Yeshen's main tent. Aper anxiously said, "Leader, this Prime Minister just received news that the main cavalry of the 5-star army has entered our Ili kingdom. Now they are burning, killing, and looting. They have threatened the safety of the king, so I received an order to rush back." The sudden change also caught Yeshen off guard. At first, he thought that Apu was afraid and wanted to leave first so that he could bring up the rear. But soon after, the informants he had left in the Ili kingdom also sent him the same message, so he knew that this matter was not fake. Aper knew that Yeshen was just going through a procedure. He didn't care whether the other party agreed or not. This time, he must leave. Therefore, after meeting with Yi Xian, he turned around and left to make arrangements for the army's retreat. As for other things, of course, he didn't have the heart to care about them. In order to hurry back, he even threw away some shield carts and ladders. For Aper, less than 5,000 of the 50,000 infantry were basically wiped out, so there was no need to take these things away. When Aper came, he had 200,000 soldiers, but when he left, he only took 125,000 soldiers, 100,000 cavalry, 5,000 infantry, and 20,000 cavalry. In addition to the 45,000 infantry that were destroyed in the siege of the first city, he and Keegan lost nearly 30,000 cavalry. In this battle, not only did he not get any benefits, but he also lost so many soldiers. It could be called a failure. Aper left very quickly. He was so worried about the safety of the king and his base that it only took him a day and a half to order a retreat. His departure made Yeshen's Warawara army a lone army. Although it was said to be a lone army, they still had about 135,000 cavalrymen under their command. Of the 30,000 cavalrymen who attacked Mabe, 25,000 were killed. Teng Shu's 10,000 cavalrymen who returned from Sanbuchuan were completely annihilated. First, he relied on the fact that his subordinates were all cavalrymen, and that his base in the Hetao region had not been attacked by the northern Ming army, so he was more relaxed than Ali Pu. He even didn't forget to bombard first. Since he was going to leave, he had to leave something behind. Otherwise, it would be a big loss. Under Yeshen's order, the 5,000 cavalry dismounted and became infantry. They pushed the heavy catapults and rushed out of the first city. He wanted to do this under the eyes of First City. He wanted to disgust Yang Chendong. The movements outside the city were updated every hour and sent to Yang Chendong. When he heard that Aper had led the Ili army to retreat, and Yeshen stubbornly wanted to take his grain fields, he had the urge to immediately send troops. Speaking of which, after a month and 8 days of defensive battles, batch after batch of veterans were recruited into the new Second Army. The new Second Army had basically taken shape under the preparations of the commander. It had the 1st Cavalry Division, the 2nd Cavalry Division, the 3rd Cavalry Division, and the Infantry Division, a total of more than 33,000 people. In addition, there were nearly 20,000 people in the new Second Army's main force, as well as the 1st Cavalry Division and the Tatar Division outside the North City. Now, he had more than 60,000 soldiers in his hands. If he launched a counterattack with all his strength, he had some confidence in winning. However, it could only be said that he had confidence, and the chances of winning were not very high. Furthermore, the cavalry that he had brought with him were all elite troops that had fought alongside him for many years. The remaining 135,000 men were already twice the number of his own men. If he were to attack recklessly before they were fully prepared, it was very likely that both sides would suffer losses. Either they didn't fight, or they had to fight and win. This was Yang Chendong's thinking. As for the more than 300,000 mu of grain fields outside the North City that needed time to prepare, it was necessary. Compared to these material things, Yang Chendong valued the lives of the soldiers more. Come, immediately send a message to Division Commander Xin Honghai in North Desert City. Ask him to bring all the cavalry that he can to the first city to provide assistance. This time, I want to inflict a heavy blow on the Walla army and let them know how stupid it is to choose our 5-star army as an opponent. Yang Chendong's eyes flashed with a strong fighting spirit. He wanted to establish the myth that the first city was invincible through this battle. He wanted to completely solve the security problem of the first city through this battle and also dispel other people's thoughts of attacking the city. After the telegram was sent out, Division Commander Xin Honghai in North Desert City, while mobilizing the cavalry in his hands, informed the leaders of the big tribes near North Desert City that it was time to fight a smooth battle. Those who wanted to take advantage of the situation could join in. In the last battle, when they were dealing with Tua Buhua, they successfully created an elite 1st Cavalry Division among the elites. At the same time, the small tribes of North Desert City that were weaker were dealt a devastating blow. Now, there were not many independent tribes left near North Desert City. Usually, everyone lived in harmony. Division Commander Xian Honghai was very self-respecting. Whenever something happened, he would discuss it with everyone, so he also had a good relationship with people here. This time, he took the initiative to stand up and said that if there was any merit, he could share it with everyone. If there were benefits, everyone could take it together. How could anyone not respond? At that moment, under the leadership of Xian Honghai, more than 6,000 men and horses were gathered. Including the Mabe division, there was a total of 20,000 cavalrymen. After receiving the news, they marched straight to the direction of Shur City the next afternoon. At this moment, Yeshen did not know about this. He just arranged for people to keep an eye on the outside of Tulu City. He was only worried about the 200,000 reinforcements of the Baiming army. As long as these people did not come out, he could still dominate the first city and do whatever he wanted. What Yeshen wanted to do now was to bombard hundreds of thousands of mu of grain fields. Even though he didn't have a lot of gunpowder in his hands and the range of his explosion was limited, he still stubbornly did it. In his view, this was him waving a knife to cut his own inner demon. Since he was defeated in the Battle of Baiming 6 years ago, Yang Chendong had become a demon in Yeshen's heart that could not be removed. Now that he finally had a chance to wipe away the shame, how could he let it go? Moreover, he had surrounded the first city for more than a month, which proved that the Duke of Loyalty was not omnipotent and could not be defeated. As long as he found the right way, he could also make the other party become honest. In this battle, Yeshen even thought that if the first city was not too sturdy, he would have been able to defeat Yang Chendong this time. With this thought, Yeshen did not leave immediately. Instead, he waited to bombard the grain fields and let Yang Chendong know what it meant to be helpless before leaving. He thought that he was showing off, but he did not know that he was standing on the edge of a cliff. The first city and Mabe city were thousands of miles apart. Xian Honghai led 20,000 cavalrymen and traveled day and night. In less than 3 days, they arrived at Wanda City, which was north of the first city. There, they met up with the world's best cavalry division and the Tatar division. They were only given a night's rest. Early the next morning, nearly 40,000 cavalrymen led the division and headed straight for the Walla encampment in the direction of the first city. At this moment, Yeshen was still busy bombarding the fertile fields. All the trebuchets were set up yesterday and officially started this morning. At this moment, Yeshen's eyes flashed with a crazy light. He wanted to use this action to tell the world that he was not afraid of Yang Chendong and was even stronger than Yang Chendong. At the same time, which was the morning of this day, the 6 100mm mortars of the logistics division in the first city were being tested in the central square of the city, which attracted the attention and curiosity of countless people. This was the first time that many people had seen this pure iron weapon in front of them. To them, the Northern Ming Army's red barbarian cannons were already very advanced, not to mention the cannons that were many times more advanced than the red barbarian cannons, which could hit targets more than 10 li away. The 100mm mortars of the 6 Gates Regiment were placed in the square, surrounded by soldiers from the logistics division who were responsible for maintaining law and order. There were many people standing in the distance. They wanted to see how this thing spat out fire and how it killed the enemy. As one of Yang Chendong's servants, Yang Si had learned from Yang Chendong professionally and systematically. It could be said that he was an artillery expert. This time, the matter of firing the cannons was naturally handed over to him. After finalizing the ruler, the scouts had already accurately marked the coordinates of the Walla cavalry's encampment. This time, they aimed at the enemy's main camp. Once the cannons were fired, it would mark the beginning of the all-out counterattack. At 9:00 in the morning. At this moment, the sky was covered with dark clouds again, indicating that a heavy rain was coming. Yang Chendong sat in the corridor of a courtyard in the Yang residence. He looked up at the sky and sighed softly, "This is a heavy rain. Perhaps this heavy rain can wash away the coldness and cruelty of war." Chapter 989. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled in the sky, giving people a very oppressive and gloomy feeling. At this moment, the 6 cannons had been calibrated. In order to deal the greatest damage to the enemy and destroy the enemy cavalry's will to resist, Yang Si chose to fire 3 shots in a row from the nearest 6 li to the nearest 12 li. In other words, in this 6-kilometer-long Walla army camp, the 6 cannons had to fire 3 shots in a row in a short period of time. That was 18 shots in a row. Without any preparation, one could imagine how much damage and shock this cannon fire would bring to people. Ready, fire. Seeing that the time was up and everything was ready, Yang Si suddenly dropped the red flag in his hand. Then, the 6 cannons let out a loud roar. 6 shots were fired out of the barrels and flew out of the city. In the square, the people didn't disperse because of the heavy rain. They still opened their eyes wide and looked at the light and roar caused by the cannons. Outside the beginning city, the Walla cavalry was less than 3 kilometers away from the city wall. They seemed to want to use this method to suppress the 5-star army and show their strength. At this moment, the front line had undoubtedly become the focal point of the cannons. First, there was a whistling sound, followed by a boom. After a loud explosion, a deep crater appeared. The 2 tents in the crater were instantly turned into ashes. The other tents on the side were also affected. There were different degrees of damage and casualties. The attack officially began. The cannons drew a beautiful arc in the sky and landed in the Walla camp. In the roar, 1 tent after another was destroyed. Group after group of unprepared Walla cavalry were killed, injured, and frightened. Yes Hen saw that the rain was coming. He was patrolling the camp with his men. He wanted to see if there were any tents that were not set up properly and if there were any stable doors that were not closed properly. It was precisely this action that saved his life. In the blink of an eye, the main tent he was in was blasted to the ground. Soon after, a giant crater appeared. Under the precise measurement of a ruler, the dozen or so personal guards and his concubine in the tent all disappeared from this world. Yes Hen looked back. His eyes were wide open and his face was full of disbelief. At this moment, the scene that had been hidden in his heart appeared again. The siege that had lasted for more than a month had made him forget how powerful the firearms in his opponent's hands were. At this moment, all the memories flooded into his mind, and at this moment, fear appeared in his eyes. Boom boom boom, the cannons fired one after another. In a short 2 minutes, 18 cannons were fired. If the cannons only caused damage to the Walla cavalry, it would only cause hundreds of deaths and thousands of injuries. For a cavalry team of nearly 140,000 people, this damage was nothing. The effect of injuring people was limited. The main purpose was to destroy their morale. Under the 18 cannonballs, the Walla cavalry became dizzy and disoriented, striking fear into their hearts. The originally high morale in their hearts was completely destroyed. At this moment, the loud bugle call sounded. Then, more than 70,000 5-star army began their crazy counterattack. They seemed to have appeared out of thin air and suddenly appeared in all directions of the Walla army camp. Unknowingly, the 4 outer city gates of the beginning city were opened. Too many cavalry warriors poured out from there. In the entire army in the beginning city, except for the infantry division of the new Second Army that continued to stay on the city walls, the other cavalry teams had all come out. They were like locusts that wreaked havoc. In a very short time, they arrived at the periphery of the Walla army camp and carried out a crazy massacre. Among these attacking armies, the 1st Cavalry Division's attack was the fiercest. At least a quarter of them had followed Tuachuo Buhuacan before. For example, the 3rd commander, Hubo, was deeply indebted to Tuachuo Buhuacan. Now that their enemy was right in front of them, they went all out. The combat power of the 1st Cavalry Division was already very terrifying. Now that they had gone all out, it was imaginable how desperate it would be. Wherever they went, the Walla cavalry was overturned and covered in blood. The Tatar division was right behind the 1st Heavenly Cavalry Division. After such a long period of hard work and sacrifice, the Tatar division had become an existence that represented a powerful force. They appeared like a flood, following closely behind the 1st Heavenly Cavalry Division. Hundreds of arrow formations were formed as they killed their way into the Walla cavalry formation, dealing heavy damage to the enemy. The new 1st Army and the new 2nd Army also rushed out of the 1st city. Their strength lay in their numbers. Everyone could huddle together to protect themselves and ensure the safety of the left and right flanks. The soldiers only needed to bravely charge forward and take the head of the target. Under such a situation where there was no distraction, everyone performed to their best. For a time, no one could stop them. Lastly, it was the Mo Bay Division and the 20,000 soldiers of the Mo Bay tribe. Relatively speaking, their strength was the weakest, especially the Mo Bay tribe's cavalry. They were used to fighting alone and did not know what it meant to work together. If it was a normal day, with their strength, facing the Walla cavalry, even if they had more people, it would be difficult for them to gain any advantage. But today was completely different. They were following behind the main force of the 5-star army, and they were going for a surprise attack. Like this, where they were not in a formation, as long as they were not isolated, they would not be in any danger. In such an environment, it also allowed them to better display their strength and try their best to kill those Walla soldiers who had been beaten until they were dizzy and disoriented. It was not true to say that they were utterly defeated. The explosions of the cannonballs had indeed caused the Walla cavalry to panic. However, when the shrill sound of the bugle horns signaled the arrival of a large army, the Walla cavalry displayed their outstanding military qualities. Many of the cavalry rushed to the stables to find their own warhorses. They picked up their own sabers and charged towards the 5-star army in the distance. This was the strength of the Walla cavalry. Perhaps they were used to sneak into the camp often. Once they found that the enemy suddenly appeared, they did not need to do anything at all. These cavalrymen could resist based on their experience. At one time, there were even several incidents where they killed the enemy and returned. But this time, they were facing an army that was just as good as the Walla cavalry. It was impossible for them to turn defeat into victory. It was just a matter of how much they could lose. Yeshen's main tent was completely destroyed by the artillery. He was stunned for a while until his subordinates, Hilei and Mutua, came to his side to ask for instructions. Only then did Yeshen regain his senses and his eyes were filled with anger. Report the situation. Lord Leader, according to the reports from the scouts of the various camps, the 5-star army has at least 70 to 80,000 people. They are currently attacking our camp from different directions. Although our cavalry warriors are valiantly resisting, the enemy's attack is too fierce and too sudden. Right now, some of the outer camps have already been occupied. General Hilei was originally in charge of the safety of the entire camp, so he did not need to prepare anything when he reported this. The outer camps have already been occupied. Also, you said that the 5-star army has 70,000 to 80,000 people. How is that possible? Where did they get so many cavalrymen? If they have this kind of strength, why do they only focus on defending the city? After Yeshen heard the detailed report, his face was filled with disbelief. Before the war, he and Apu had done some research. The 5-star army was just a new army in the grasslands. There were around 30,000 people. There was also the famous 1st Cavalry Division that had a few thousand people. Even if they included the 20,000 people guarding Immortal City, they only had around 50,000 people. Moreover, Apu was in a hurry to leave because it was confirmed that someone had gone to Ili to cause trouble. It should be the 5-star army's doing. Since they had already divided their forces to Ili, how could they still have so many troops left here, and the number of people far exceeded the data he investigated. Chief, do you think the 5-star army recruited a large number of people in the beginning city? You know that there are more than 500,000 people in the beginning city, and they are all gathered together. It is not difficult to select tens of thousands or even more adult men from here. He had already thought about this question in his heart. Seeing that the time was right, he spoke out his guess. Yes, it should be like this. They must want to make a huge formation to force us to retreat. In this way, the crisis of the beginning city can be resolved. Another warrior, Mu Tuo, agreed with Lei's idea and said aloud. Yeshen's eyes flashed with a thoughtful look. After about 2 seconds, he nodded. Okay, then let's test the strength of the other party. Mu Tuo, I will leave this matter to you. General Lei, you have to pay attention to the situation of the battalions at all times. If there is any danger, you have to send troops to support in time. Since the 5-star army wants to use the commoners as an army to scare this chief, then let's have a good fight. I want to see who will be the winner in a fair and square battle without using any schemes or tricks. Yes. Mu Tuo saluted and left excitedly. Since the last time he led 30,000 cavalry to attack Immortal City and was defeated by the world's best cavalry division and the Tatar division, he felt that he could not raise his head in the army. Now that he had the opportunity to lead the army again, of course he would cherish it and perform well. Chapter 990. Lei didn't leave, but was stopped by Yeshen. Go make some calculations and have our elites retreat. If things don't work out, we need to leave the battlefield as quickly as possible. Do you understand? Leader, do you mean that we might lose this battle? Lei carefully worded his words. There's a saying in the art of war, it's not wrong to think about defeat before planning for victory, Yeshen said cunningly. He didn't understand much of the 36 stratagems, but he completely understood the last stratagem, retreat. He could even use it in battle. He had a feeling that Yang Chendong wouldn't do such a thing if he didn't have a certain chance of winning. It was necessary to prepare beforehand. As long as the main force and elites were still there, this battle wouldn't be considered a defeat. After understanding Yeshen's meaning, Lei asked worriedly, Leader, should we inform General Mu Tuo, He should be going to the front lines soon. If we suddenly retreat with our elites, won't he be in danger? No need. Mu Tuo should have been executed in the previous battle. Keeping him alive for so long is my benevolence. Let him fight to the death on the battlefield and gain a good reputation. Isn't that better? Yeshen's ruthless side was once again displayed. In the eyes of this kind of person, there was only value in using others. As for friendship and feelings, they didn't exist at all. If anyone wanted to talk about feelings with him, they would be looking for sadness and death. After Lei heard this, his heart skipped a beat. While he was on guard, his expression didn't change as he said, Yes, leader. This subordinate understands. How would Mu Tuo know about this? He, who had left excitedly, was now leading his army forward. This time, he had to perform well to make up for his previous mistakes. If everything was as the chief and Lei thought, then the 5-star army should be made up of commoners in disguise. If that was the case, they would not be a match for him at all. His chance to make a contribution had come. As expected of one of the 4 great generals, once Mu Tuo entered the battlefield, he launched fierce attacks again and again. And he was facing the Immortal army and Immortal army that had arrived last. Relatively speaking, they were also the weakest group. When the strongest met the stronger, the result was naturally obvious. Although Xian Honghai commanded well and filled in the gaps in time, the soldiers under him lacked the ability to fight together. Before the battle, they could still have a good formation, but once the battle started, they all became scattered sand. They could only fight for themselves and it was difficult to form any cooperation. Facing the fierce Walla cavalry, they could only retreat. Mu Tuo repelled his opponent, which made him believe in the chief and he lays judgment even more. It also made him have a bold idea, which was to continuously attack and penetrate the enemy. Then, he would take the opportunity to see if he could take down the origin city that had no military strength. If he could really do this, he would have made a great contribution. Then, who would dare to look down on him? Mu Tuo's idea was correct. The first city was indeed empty of soldiers. Only an infantry division was left to defend the city. The Walla army did not collapse in the face of a heavy attack. Instead, they still had the strength to fight back. When this matter was reported to Yang Chendong, he was somewhat surprised. Under normal circumstances, in the face of a sudden attack, coupled with the power of the artillery, most troops would not be able to resist. Once they began to retreat, it would become a situation of defeat. In that case, they would have to fight the battle with the wind and have the advantage in their hands. The Walla army's reaction was so unexpected that Yang Chendong understood that any force that could dominate for a period of time was not a fluke. They indeed had their own strengths. And since the Walla army did not retreat, then he did not need to hold back. He just needed to use all his means. Send orders to Hai Wu Division and the reconnaissance team of the new First Army. Let them attack the Walla army from the south and disrupt their formation. The telegrapher, Wang Shan, agreed and turned to leave. Then Beta Persei excitedly entered the courtyard. As soon as he saw Yang Chendong, he excitedly said, "Young master, there is a report from the front. There is a Walla army of about 10,000 that has broken through our encirclement and is moving under the first city." "There is such a thing?" Yang Chendong was stunned. He did not expect that the Walla army not only had the strength to fight back, but also had the intention to seize the first city for the second time. "Yes, we have figured it out. This Walla army is led by Muther, one of the 4 generals under Yeshen. The direction he chose to attack is the Mo Bay Division and the Mo Bay Tribal Coalition. Young master, you know that their combat power is mediocre. If they fight some easy battles, they can achieve good results, but when facing a strong army, it is not enough." Beta Persei reported everything he knew. Just as Beta Persei finished speaking, there was a sudden rumble of thunder in the sky. The heavy rain that had been brewing for a long time was about to fall. Yang Chendong looked up at the sky and then looked at Beta Persei. "Do you mean to take the army out and destroy the Walla army?" "Yes, young master, but I don't know if it's possible." The light in Beta Persei's eyes betrayed the excitement in his heart. As a man, and a hot-blooded man, if there was a chance to gallop on the battlefield, of course he would not refuse. Instead, he would fight for it. Beta Persei's strength was not weak. In the past few years, he had practiced his equestrian skills on the grasslands well. But because he was with Yang Chendong, the opportunity to fight was completely deprived. Now that he finally had a chance to perform well, how could he miss it? Naturally, he would fight for it. Yang Chendong only hesitated for a moment before agreeing to Beta Persei's request. "Your desire to fight is good, but now there is no decent cavalry in the first city. What do you have to fight with this Muther? Young master, don't you have your 2 guard brigades? They add up to 1,000 people. That's enough. Besides, although the guard brigade has not stopped training since it was established, they have not experienced any battle after all. After a long time, I'm afraid that their skills will be rusty. There are some opportunities to test their strength. Isn't it the best of both worlds?" Beta Persei opened his mouth and found a good reason for himself. The two guard brigades had a total of about 1,000 people. This was also Yang Chendong's last defense force, but at the same time, it was also the strongest defense force. Those who could enter the guard brigade not only had to have a clean background, but their skills were also excellent. In the eyes of many people, being able to enter the guard brigade was a glorious existence. The difficulty was even many times more difficult than entering the Cold Front and the 1st Cavalry Division. Every member had to be carefully selected by young heir and the two captains before they could join the team. However, there was a problem, and that was that no matter how many connections you pulled, you still wouldn't be able to get what you wanted. These people were also highly skilled. It was not an exaggeration to say that even the 1st Cavalry Division could not be their opponent in a battle of 1,000 people. This was why Beta Persei had confidence in the two guard brigades and why he dared to make the decision to fight thousands of people. Yang Chendong usually trained with the guard brigade, so he was naturally aware of their strength. Since Beta Persei was pleading like this, and considering that the guard brigade indeed lacked joint combat experience, this might be an opportunity. He finally nodded. Okay, I can agree to your request, but young master also has a condition. Young master, please speak. Beta Persei took a step forward excitedly, his face full of eagerness. I agree to let you send troops, but young master, I also want to go with you. How about it? Yang Chendong also wanted to see the scene of the Walla cavalry charging with 10,000 people. He also had a hot-blooded side to him. Okay. Wait. Beta Persei instinctively agreed, but he quickly came back to his senses and shook his head repeatedly. No, the ladies and Tiger Head have strictly ordered me not to let young master take risks. This is absolutely impossible. Yang Chendong knew that Beta Persei would not agree immediately, so he questioned him. Beta Persei, you just said that with the strength of the guard brigade, it would not be a problem to deal with the Walla. Are you doubting the strength of the guard brigade? No, young master. Beta Persei quickly shook his head and denied. That's good. Since the combat power of the guard brigade is invincible in the world, there is no danger. What is there to be afraid of for young master to follow them? Well, it's settled. The battle doesn't wait for anyone. Go and arrange it immediately. Yang Chendong waved his hand at Beta Persei without any explanation. Beta Persei retreated just like that, only to realize that he had been tricked by the young master. But he knew that even if the young master had made a decision, he could not stop it with his ability. If he continued to talk, he was afraid that the young master would have the opportunity to fight, and he would only be trapped at home. If that was the case, then so be it on the battlefield. As long as he was careful and protected the young master by his side, and with the young master's skills that no one knew how powerful, there should not be any danger. The heavy rain poured down, as if the sky was leaking, and it fell on the grassland, washing away the blood on the cavalry on the battlefield. Mutuo led a total of 20,000 cavalrymen and charged fiercely for a while, breaking through the obstacles of the Mabe division and the Mabe tribe, and finally arrived in front of the west gate of the first city. There were less than 8,000 cavalrymen left behind, and many of them were injured. When he saw the closed gate of the first city in front of him, the original hope in Mutuo's eyes was extinguished by more than half. Under such heavy rain, without any siege weapons, it was impossible for him and his 8,000 cavalrymen to rush into the city. Victory was so close to him, but it was also so far away. General, what should we do? The rain is too heavy, and the brothers are too tired. We have to find a place to rest. A commander in the army walked to Mutuo's side and asked tentatively. Chapter 991. Taking a deep breath, Mutuo knew that he had done something useless this time. With a dejected look, he was ready to give the order to retreat. Wait, look, did the city gate open by itself? A chilly arch interrupted the decision that Mutuo was about to make. He pointed to the west gate of the city and shouted loudly. The heavy rain was still falling, and the west gate opened from the inside. Then, a group of black cavalry under the protection of full armor walked out. A group of 5 people, despite the heavy rain, still came out as usual. The neat order seemed to prove their iron-like discipline. After walking for a full quarter of an hour, all 1,000 black cavalry walked out of the city gate. Finally, Yang Chendong, who was dressed in a particularly eye-catching golden robe, walked out of the city gate under the protection of Beta Persei and the others. Just after he left the city, the heavy gate behind him slowly closed. The sound was so clear that no matter how bad the weather was, it still clearly reached everyone's ears. In the past, when Yang Chendong went out, he always wore a red robe and a cloak. It could be said that he had always been concerned about the feelings of the North and South Daming. But this time, Baiming tricked him and obviously hurt his heart. At this moment, he no longer hid and put on the golden robe that represented imperial power. Yang Chendong was also dressed in black armor, only revealing a pair of murderous eyes. When he looked ahead and saw the 8,000 Walla cavalry, he did not show the slightest nervousness. On the contrary, he said in a very calm voice, "The black cavalry only belongs to you. This is the most powerful existence. But after today, I hope to add a new title to you, Long Wei. The young master hopes that none of you will fall behind and can become a member of the new Long Wei. Next, use the steel sword in your hand to prove your strength. Long Wei, Long Wei, Long Wei." 1,000 black cavalry made the same sound. For a moment, this shout seemed to have covered and surpassed the sound of thunder, echoing between heaven and earth. Seeing that the young master had raised everyone's morale to the extreme with just a few words, Beta Persei knew that it was time to launch an attack. At that moment, he pulled out his steel sword and pointed it forward, shouting loudly, "Brothers, it's time to prove our strength. Let's go. Charge!" 1,000 black knights rushed out amidst the battle cries. Even Yang Chendong, who was in the group, did the same. He pulled the reins of the white dragon with one hand and held the shining steel sword with the other. He exerted force in his legs and rushed forward. Kill! Mu Tuo's eyes also flickered with intense killing intent. If one looked closely, one could see the unconcealable excitement and agitation. Originally, he thought that he would have to return empty-handed this time. Unexpectedly, this loyal duke of the great Ming dynasty rushed out on his own. When he first saw the flag of the god of war, he thought that his eyes were playing tricks on him. However, when he saw that the person wearing the golden battle robe should be the god of war in the eyes of others and the god of war in the eyes of leader Yes Hen, he knew that his chance to make a great contribution had come. Using his frenzied roar to vent his emotions, Mutuo urged his horse forward, leading the 8,000 cavalrymen behind him to encircle the 1,000 black cavalry like a swarm of locusts, looking as though they were about to swallow them whole. Facing an enemy 8 times their number, the 1,000 black knights were not afraid at all. On the contrary, they were filled with endless killing intent and excitement. They had the best individual qualities and the strongest armor to protect themselves. Even their warhorses were fully protected. Most importantly, the steel swords in their hands were the latest products. It was said that a very rare material was added to them, allowing them to achieve the effect of cutting through iron like mud. However, these steel swords had never appeared before and no one knew about it. Even during training and experiments, they had only cut their own warhorses. Now, they finally had the chance to experiment on the enemy. Who would be courteous and fall behind? Fighting alongside the 6th young master was the proudest thing in their lives. At this moment, all the soldiers gave it their all so that they could continuously kill the enemy and show off their might. At the same time, they could also become the first batch of members of Long Wei. The 1,000 black knights carried an incomparable sense of pride. They wore impenetrable armor and held indestructible sharp swords. They rode on their warhorses and raised their swords. The intense killing intent emitted from their bodies seemed to make the rain between heaven and earth tremble. The rain seemed to not dare to touch their bodies. Kill! Dao Shao, as the leader of the second guard team, rushed to the forefront. As the tip of the arrow formation at the front, it was as if there was no one in front of him. He fiercely stabbed towards the Walla cavalry in front of him. The steel swords were constantly waved in mid-air. Wherever they went, the Walla cavalry soldiers who were close to Dao Shao were all stunned. They had all discovered an unimaginable fact. That was, whenever their scimitars or sabers collided with the steel swords, they would be broken. Even though the cavalry was terrifying, the impact was even more terrifying. However, when the cavalry soldiers lost their weapons, they were like wolves without sharp teeth. The threat they brought to people was relatively small. Dao Zhao's victory was just the beginning. In the following period of time, as the Black Knights continued to attack, more and more enemies' sabers were cut in half. When many of the Walla cavalry soldiers reacted and wanted to avoid the sabers of the Black Knights, they sadly discovered that the sabers in their hands could not penetrate the black armor. They could not achieve the effect of killing or even injuring the enemy. On the contrary, when the steel swords in the hands of the Black Knights were no longer obstructed by the sabers, when they slashed the bodies of the Black Knights, it was a life. Unless it was necessary, in the eyes of the Black Knights, there were only dead people. There were no captives. After Dao Shao quickly dug deep into the Walla cavalry, the leader of the first guard team, Qiu Vi, also quickly engaged in battle with the Walla cavalry. In the following period of time, countless lives fell in front of them. In terms of combat strength, equipment, quality, and combat strength, no one was a match for the Black Knights. It had been a long time since the Black Knights participated in a proper battle. For a time, many people only remembered that there was a very powerful 1st Cavalry Division on the grasslands, but forgot that there was a Black Knights that was even more powerful than them. And this battle was the time to verify and continue their legend. On the west gate tower of the beginning city, although the rain was still pouring, there were more and more soldiers and people standing on top of it. They rushed over after hearing the news that the Heaven Khan was going to attack personally. They wanted to see the Heaven Khan's glory. The facts did not disappoint them. Although it seemed that the military strength of the two sides was obviously not equal, with 1,000 against 8,000. If such a thing was told to anyone, they would probably arbitrarily choose the winning side. However, it happened to the Heaven Khan. This person who constantly created miracles seemed to be very normal for him to win. He was originally a messenger sent by the longevity heaven to the grasslands. Anyone who made an enemy of him was equivalent to provoking the gods. It was only a matter of time before they were punished. Look, the person wearing the golden god of war is the Heaven Khan. Look, the Heaven Khan is moving. Heavens, the way he wields his saber is so perfect. Obviously, the person who shouted this must be the grassland woman. The difference in their living environment made them more cheerful and more proactive. The Heaven Khan had already rushed into the enemy camp. His golden battle robe was so dazzling that it attracted the attention of countless Walla cavalry. It was just that on top of the city walls, no one was worried about Yang Chendong. It was as if in their eyes, no one in this world could defeat the Heaven Khan. Therefore, no one felt that the Heaven Khan was cruel when he kept waving his saber, causing blood and limbs to splatter everywhere. Even some of the more timid girls on the city gate tower could only see the Heavenly Khan's imposing figure and clean movements. Yang Chendong had indeed killed his way into the enemy camp. He was covered in black armor from head to toe, so he was not afraid of any opponent at all. In this kind of battle that was close to a one-sided massacre, he had to show enough bravery and let the world sing about it. He had to make those who worshipped him worship him even more, and those who did not worship him before become his admirers. At Yang Chendong's current position, his every move represented a political significance. He was not a person who liked to kill, but at this moment, he had to show enough courage and drive to kill. This would play a very positive role in his future rule here. Beta Persei and the others followed closely beside Yang Chendong, and at the same time, they kept waving their sabers. The enemies who rushed over died under their feet, and the enemies who rushed over were chopped to death in front of them. They were invincible all the way. That's Yang Chendong. Kill him. Kill him and our names will go down in history. Kill him and we will make a great contribution. Mu Tuo saw Yang Chendong from afar, and then shouted. His eyes were bloodshot, representing the excitement in his heart at the moment. This was Yang Chendong. How many people hated him to the bone and wished for him to die immediately. Unfortunately, most of those who had such thoughts and put it into action had become a pile of bones. Now that an opportunity had been thrown in front of him, there was no way Mu Tuo would not seize it. Mu Tuo widened his eyes and slapped his warhorse with all his might. At this moment, he waved his saber and approached Yang Chendong. At this moment, he could even see the miraculous martial art in front of him. He seemed to see the scene of his legend being sung by tens of thousands of people in the grasslands. Get lost. A loud roar interrupted Mu Tuo's fantasy. It was Beta Persei's saber, to repel and kill anyone who wanted to approach the young master from both sides. Chapter 992. Mu Tuo was naturally different from ordinary cavalry. Seeing the blade coming at him, he dodged nimbly. The steel blade brushed past his shoulder and disappeared in a flash. With a sneer in his eyes, he did something that he would regret for the rest of his life. He swung his blade at Beta Persei's body. The speed of the blade was so fast that the Shadow Knight protecting Beta Persei did not have time to block it. Seeing that the attack was about to succeed, although the blade could not hurt Beta Persei due to the invulnerable black armor, it would inevitably bring shame to Beta Persei. Just as the blade was about to fall, Beta Persei's majestic body suddenly turned nimbly, making a move that did not match his tall body at all. Just as the blade was about to fall on the black armor, the steel blade in his hand finally blocked it at the last moment. The collision of the two weapons produced a very crisp sound. Mu Tuo was not discouraged by the fact that his blade was blocked and did not succeed. Yang Chendong wasn't his target in the first place. He was just itching to fight back. Since he couldn't hurt Yang Chendong, he didn't want to waste any more time here. He had to find Yang Chendong as soon as possible and kill him. Riding on his warhorse, Mu Tuo turned around once more, and saw Yang Chendong right in front of him. Moreover, it was his opponent's back. Knowing that an opportunity had presented itself, Mu Tuo was naturally excited. He instinctively raised his blade and stabbed forward, his face flashing with the look of a treacherous scheme that was about to succeed. But in the next moment, this action suddenly stopped. It was for no other reason than because he found that the original saber in his hand had been broken into half. Including the hilt, he only held half of the saber in his hand. He did not know that after his attack was blocked by Beta Persei, the saber had become like this. Just as he was wondering why the saber had become like this, Yang Chendong, who was right in front of him, suddenly turned around and slashed at him. This strike was fast and accurate. The horizontal slash landed right on Mu Tuo's neck, bringing the head that could still make any expression into the air. Mu Tuo had died in battle. Even at the moment of his death, he couldn't help but wonder what was going on. Why did his saber suddenly break into two? Could it be that this person was really sent by the longevity heaven? Could it be that anyone who went against him was seeking their own death? He wanted to continue asking questions, but Mu Tuo no longer had the chance. At this moment, he couldn't be more dead. What he didn't know was that Yang Chendong had only turned around because he had sensed the danger behind him. The heavenly Khan didn't care about him at all, even if he reported his name. This was because in front of Yang Chendong, even if it was Yes Hen, it was nothing to be proud of. They were not on the same starting line to begin with. Mu Tuo had died in battle, and thousands of Walla cavalry were buried with him. And as the rain grew heavier, more and more people died, and more people were buried with him. And this battle only lasted for more than half an hour, and it was over after a little more than an hour. The new army had returned to the beginning city. They were sent by Tiger's man. After learning that someone had broken through the Mo Bay Division's defensive line, he was worried about the safety of this place, so he sent Deng Yu, the leader of the new army, to come personally. Of course, if Tiger's man knew that the young master had personally participated in the battle below the city, he would have given up everything and rushed over. The new army came, but by the time they arrived, the battle was already over. Nearly half of the 8,000 Walla army were killed, including the main general, Mu Tuor. The other half had already dismounted and knelt down to surrender. After witnessing the power of the Black Knights, their inner defenses collapsed, and they no longer had the courage to fight with their sabers. On the other hand, none of the Black Knights died in battle, and only 7 of their brothers were injured. As long as they rested properly, they could immediately rejoin the battlefield. 1,000 against 8,000, and they still managed to achieve such a result. This was the strength of the elites. 6th Young Master. When Deng Yu saw Yang Chendong, he excitedly dismounted and knelt down. You came at the right time. Immediately assist the infantry division in the city to take this prisoner away. Now that we are out, we have to go to the main battlefield to take a look. After Yang Chendong gave Deng Yu an encouraging look, he ordered Beta Persei to open the city gate and solve the problem of the prisoner. Just as Yang Chendong was engaged in a bloody battle with the Walla cavalry, Hai's 5th Division and the new army reconnaissance group were also ordered to launch a fierce attack on the rear of the Walla army. Hai's 5th Division, which was made up entirely of musketeers, fully displayed their destructive power. Facing the unprepared rear of the Walla cavalry, they only charged and killed nearly 1,000 people, causing great chaos. The morale of the Walla army, which had already suffered defeat after defeat on the front line and was riddled with holes, finally began to waver when they received news that their rear had been attacked. Originally, they believed what their leader said. They had a great advantage in numbers, and as long as they could pay a certain price to stabilize the situation, then it would be time for them to counterattack with all their strength. The reality did not match the plan, which made many Walla generals waver. Even as the leader, Yeshen could see that the situation was unfavorable. He knew that if the battle continued, he would be the one to lose. General He lay, is everything ready? In the temporary main tent, he looked at the reports of defeat one after another. He had already lost the news of a decisive battle with Yang Chendong and had completely given up on the idea of a decisive battle. Leader, everything is ready. According to your plan, if we retreat now, we can withdraw about 80,000 people. He lay, who was already prepared, said aloud. Good, notify everyone. When the sky turns dark and the rain stops, we will retreat. As for those who are not on the retreat list, we can order them to launch a counterattack now. We must create an illusion that we are determined to fight to the death. This will help us maintain a safe distance between both sides. Yeshen's voice was calm, but the exhaustion on his face and even the trace of fear in his heart had already betrayed him. Once the order was given, the Walla army's counterattack began. It was as if they didn't care about their lives. The counterattack of tens of thousands of soldiers increased the pressure on the advancing 5-star corps, causing several armies to have no choice but to retreat and fight in groups. Other than the 1st Cavalry Division, which had already split into 5 units, most of the 5-star army on the battlefield had already gathered together. Retreat. Yeshen, who received the report from the scout, immediately gave the order. When the sky turned dark, the Tile army that had been charging forward courageously suddenly retreated like a receding tide. The generals of the 5-star army who were gathering their troops realized that they had been tricked. At this moment, it was already too late to give the order for the entire army to pursue. Yeshen gave the order to retreat. Following that, he sent out 5,000 cavalrymen to chase after the Langwu division and the scouting group in order to prevent them from interfering with his retreat. In the end, he also sent out 5,000 cavalrymen to block the 1st Cavalry Division that was chasing after him. The original 80,000 retreating soldiers were reduced to 70,000 just like that. Under the cover of the night's rain, they quickly retreated from the battlefield. It had to be said that the Walla cavalry's discipline was still very strong. Even under such circumstances, they still retreated. However, the 10,000 cavalrymen he sent out were quickly killed and captured. Whether it was facing the fierce attacks of the Lengwu Division and the scouting group, or facing the bravery of the 1st Cavalry Division, these cavalrymen would only be sending themselves to their deaths if they charged forward. After defeating another 10,000 cavalrymen, the 1st Cavalry Division's commander, Hu Bo, and a few others suggested that they should continue the chase. No matter what, they couldn't let Yeshen escape. However, at the crucial moment, Division Commander Tian Hu gave the order to not give chase before the main force arrived. After all, Yeshen had 70,000 elite cavalrymen. If they charged forward alone, they would most likely be surrounded and heavily injured. Although it was said that with the strength of the 1st Cavalry Division, they were not afraid of anyone. However, if they knew that they couldn't do it, it wasn't bravery but stupidity. Yang Chendong came to the main battlefield early in the morning of the 2nd day. At this moment, the heavy rain finally stopped after 3 days, leaving only a light drizzle in the air. When he saw the corpses and blood everywhere he looked, he couldn't help but sigh. The setting sun on the battlefield is as red as blood, white bones are exposed for thousands of miles in the wilderness. Young Master, the scouting group reported that Yeshen brought 70,000 Walla cavalry back to Jingzhou City and Shajing City. At the same time, they also fought with the Baiming army not far from the city. Beta Persei looked at the battle report that had just been sent and reported to Yang Chendong. Fighting with the Baiming army? What's going on? Yang Chendong asked with some confusion. Didn't they already join forces? Why would they fight at this time? For this question, Beta Persei of course didn't know how to answer, he just ordered people to investigate again. Yang Chendong didn't have time to think about what was going on. Since the battle had reached this point, if he stopped now, it would be inevitable that he would be looked down upon. Perhaps in the future, there would be people who would do the same thing. So this time, he had to get some interest, and also take this opportunity to tell everyone that the 5-star army was not to be trifled with. Whoever wanted to cause trouble, they had to be prepared to pay the price. Order the 3rd Cavalry Division of the new 2nd Army, Mabe Division, and the Mabe Mongol tribe to stay and clean up the battlefield. Order Yang Si in the city to take the Logistics Division out of the city to assist. The rest of the army set out and go to Shajing City. We want to recover Jingzhou City and Shajing City. Yang Chendong said in a heroic tone. Taking these 2 cities was the interest that Yang Chendong demanded from Yeshen. At the same time, he also opened up the passage from the 1st city to Ili City. Otherwise, once the Baiming army took advantage of the situation, he was afraid that if he wanted to reach out in the future, he would be restricted. Chapter 993. Jingzhou City. It was one of the few well-preserved cities on the grassland. In the past, this place had always belonged to the Tatar Empire and was one of the important cities under the rule of Tuachuo Buhua. It was not until the Battle of the Beginning City that he lost to Yang Chendong. He, who led 3,000 elites, was besieged by Yang Chendong. In the end, he died in battle, and these cities became ownerless. Yeshen seized the opportunity and occupied this place, which became the front line for him to extend his black hand to the 1st city. But all of this was far from over. At the beginning of the year, the Baiming army sent out 400,000 troops from the north, south, and west. Soon, Jingzhou City changed hands and became the Xian mansion of the Baiming army. But soon, the situation changed. The Baiming army's southern front, Yanghong, was defeated. The Walla also invited Ili to join forces with him to come to the grassland. The Xian Mansion army had to retreat in the face of great pressure, and the Jingzhou city changed hands again. After that, the Walla army led by Yeshen and the Yili army joined forces to besiege the first city. This place became the base for transporting provisions from the rear. But then, Yili army's nest was attacked. Prime Minister Arip had no choice but to retreat. Taking the opportunity, the Five-Star Army launched a counterattack and fought a great battle with the Walla army under the first city. It seemed that the battle situation was unpredictable, but as long as one was observant, one could see the opportunity in it. For example, Deng Chang, the military supervisor eunuch of the Xian Mansion army, was one of them. He boasted that he was smart. After receiving the order from the chief eunuch, Ji Ning, Deng Chang mobilized the genie guards to put Shi Wanshan, Ancient River, and Ning Wenfeng under house arrest. Because of this, he obtained the power to control the army. When the first city defense battle was in full swing, he had been paying attention to the movements of various parties, imagining if he could find any benefits from it. For this matter, he took the initiative to find Shi Wanshan and the other two who were under house arrest. Under the righteous cause, the four of them discussed and finally came to a unified opinion. If the Five-Star Army lost this battle, the Baiming Army would take Saihan Mountain and make it the gateway to the northwest to protect the safety of Tulu City. On the other hand, if the Five-Star Army won, they would think of a way to take Jingzhou City or Shajing City and regain control of the situation here. Now that they had a plan, all they had to do was wait for news from the front line. After sending countless scouts, the Five-Star Army, they finally came back to the First City Defense Army. Of course. Of this, SSSSSSS don't ask why, don't ask what the reason is, Yang Chendong can give people this kind of feeling of confidence. Previously, Shi Wanshan and the others were already puzzled by the fact that they only defended the beginning city without attacking. Logically speaking, with the strength of the Five-Star Army in this area, it was impossible for them to be so helpless. The current counterattack had proven everything. It wasn't that the Five-Star Army didn't have the strength, but that they had been waiting for something. Of course, they did not know that Yang Chendong wanted to use the defensive battle to train his troops. At the same time, he wanted to see if there would be any problems with the defense of the first city. After all, he couldn't stay here forever, so he had to be aware of everything here. Regardless of Yang Chendong's thoughts, Deng Chang was more interested in his own opportunity. Since everyone said that the Walla army would be defeated, what he needed to do now was to attack and occupy Jingzhou City. Regarding Deng Chang's, Shi Wanshan and the other two had the same opinion. According to them, the Walla army might be defeated, but after all, they had hundreds of thousands of cavalry. Even if they fought with the Five-Star Army, they wouldn't be defeated in one battle. If they were to attack and occupy Jingzhou City now, it would still be very dangerous. It was better to wait and see. When the Five-Star Army appeared, everyone would cooperate. The other party would attack Shajing City, and they would attack Jingzhou City. Shi Wanshan and the other two's words belonged to the old cities. For Deng Chang, who wanted to make contributions, this was not in line with his interests. On the surface, Deng Chang agreed to Shi Wanshan and the other two's request. However, after leaving the yamen of the three nobles, Deng Chang changed his mind. He decided to take a risk and take down Jingzhou City. Deng Chang's thinking was very simple. Once they could take Jingzhou City and station a certain number of soldiers there, even if the defeated Walla army was dissatisfied, they wouldn't waste time attacking the city. In this way, the great merit of taking Jingzhou City would be his alone. In this way, he would have a chance to return to the capital and enter the imperial palace. Only by working at the emperor's side could a eunuch be promoted faster and have more hope of standing out. Having made his decision, Deng Chang did not let the merit go to his head. He chose to take Jingzhou City through deception rather than a forceful attack. In other words, he sent people to appear outside Jingzhou City in the name of labor. If they could smoothly enter the city, that would be for the best. At the very least, if they could trick a portion of the Walla army out, the pressure of the siege would be greatly reduced. One could say that Deng Chong truly had made many preparations. For this reason, he had even taken out a portion of the limited provisions in Yamen and sent it to Jingzhou city. But he had never imagined that when Ting Shu's army of 10,000 had been wiped out, Yang Chendong had intentionally framed the Baiming army. In other words, the Walla army did not trust the Baiming army at this moment. Deng Chong knew nothing of this. Just when he had wanted to use their relationship as allies to deal a heavy blow to the retreating Walla army, it had been the other side who had made the first move. At the gates of Jingzhou city, the Baiming army had pretended to be a labor force and was preparing to strike, but the Walla army had beaten them at their own game, happily exiting the city. Then, the 5,000 cavalry left behind to guard the city attacked, catching the Xian Mansion army off guard. The 5,000 cavalrymen did not greet him and charged forward. It was only when their sabers landed on the Xuanfu soldiers' necks that Deng Chong realized that he had once again overestimated his opponent's credibility. It turned out that this was a heartless person, a race that could kick their friendship away like a ball and betray their allies. Before the Xian Mansion army could even take out their weapons, they were defenseless. Nearly 10,000 of them were killed by the 5,000 Walla cavalry, and countless more were injured. Deng Chong, who had not only failed to complete his mission, but also suffered heavy losses, was very angry. He quickly transferred 30,000 cavalry from Sanbuchuan city. He did not believe that the Walla army with only 5,000 could do anything. It was at this time that even more unfavorable news came. The Vara army had retreated after the battle with the Five-Star Army, and their main force of 70,000 had retreated back to the Shaojing region. Their vanguard had coincidentally clashed with the 30,000 cavalry he had sent. Needless to say, the Xian Mansion soldiers were once again defeated due to their inferior numbers and combat strength. The 30,000 cavalrymen were not even able to display half of their battle prowess. After losing another few thousand cavalrymen, Deng Chong had no choice but to release Shi Wanshan and the other two. However, in the face of such a disadvantageous situation, the only thing Commander Shi could do was to retreat into the city and prepare to defend the city. Sanbuchuan city once again entered a defensive state, but this time, it was not the Walla army that surrounded the city, but the Five-Star Army. Following closely behind was the Five-Star Army that was truly here to pick the peaches. When the Walla army retreated to the Shaojing region, Yang Chendong led the Five-Star Army's main force of several tens of thousands to rush over. When Yes Hen led his troops into Jingzhou city, Yang Chendong rushed over. Following that, the Hai Wu division took out the rocket launchers that they had brought along, and aimed at the Jingzhou city's north gate that seemed to be ready for battle. It was the same siege, but the difference in weapons meant that the outcome would be different. When the city gates opened, the 1st Cavalry Division rushed into the city, brandishing their blades, and began a merciless slaughter. They wanted to vent all their hatred towards Yes Hen for killing Tuachuo Buhua. Only Yes Hen reacted quickly. When he heard that the north gate had fallen in such a short period of time, he knew that the situation was not good. He left behind the original 5,000 cavalry to defend the city, and then led the 70,000 main force to retreat. Facing the full-force counterattack of the Five-Star Army, the Walla army's heart was unsteady, and they retreated step by step. Not only did they quickly lose Jingzhou city, they also lost the nearby Shaojing city, and left the region like a stray dog. Yang Chendong knew the logic of not chasing a cornered enemy. Right now, he was not ready to fight a decisive battle with the Walla army. After days of marching in the rain, the Five-Star Army was exhausted. Since their strategic goal had been achieved, and they had taken over Shaojing city and Zhuanzhou city, then they should know when to stop. They should stop chasing and digest the fruits of war first. While resting, he did not forget to gather grass and beat rabbits, and surrounded Sanbuchuan city. Previously, when the Walla and Ili joined forces to attack Shi city, the Baiming Xian Mansion army played a very disgraceful role. Now, it was time to settle the score. Sanbuchuan city was once again surrounded. Shi Wanshan and the others in the city did not know whether to laugh or cry. Originally, they thought that the result of the war was them taking advantage of the opportunity to reap the benefits. But because of Deng Chang's rash action, they lost all the opportunities, and now they were like turtles in a jar. Although the 5-star army outside the city only had 40,000 to 50,000 people, and the Xian Mansion army in the city still had 170,000 people, but for some reason, after the opponent became the 5-star army, General Shi Wanshan could not give the order to counterattack. There were too many facts that proved the strength of the 5-star army and that they could not be provoked. Even if he really sent out the army, even if he won, it would only be a Pyrrhic victory. Who knew if the Walla cavalry would rush over at that time to reap the benefits? They did not go out of the city to set up a formation. They only sent a messenger out of the city to ask for help from Governor Shi Heng. Then, the 5-star army and the Xian Mansion army faced each other across the city. On the surface, it looked like the well water did not interfere with the river water. Yang Qindong indeed did not have the intention to attack Sanbuchuan city. Otherwise, he would not have given the other party a chance to ask for help. The reason why he did this was for his own big plan, so that he could smoothly ascend to the throne. Chapter 994. In the temporary tent, Yang Qindong called for the commander of Hai Wu Division, He Gong, in order to achieve his goal. Division Commander He, according to our intelligence, I'm afraid that it won't be long before the 200,000 reinforcements from northern Ming come to us. What I want you to do is to destroy the 100 cannons that they brought with them. Is there a problem? Facing Yang Qindong, He Gong excitedly replied. Sixth young master, in order to achieve our goal, can we use all the weapons we have? Yes, but there's a condition. It's best if you don't injure anyone. Yang Qindongqing nodded. He knew that it was impossible to hit those cannons in the army without killing a person, but he was also a Han person. If he could kill one less, he would kill one less. Understood, I promised to complete the mission. Knowing that they could use advanced weapons to launch destructive attacks, He Gong was full of confidence. Hai Wu Division also had some rocket launchers, which would become the best weapons to destroy the enemy's cannons. When the news of Sanbuchuan being surrounded arrived, Baiming's commander-in-chief, Marquis Wuxia Xianxia, had already arrived at Xuanfu City with 200,000 reinforcements. Before leaving Xuanfu, he also sent someone to the capital to inform them that he wanted to fight the 5-star army. According to Xianxia, the 5-star army had just fought with the Walla army and the Ili army. Although they had won, it was a Pyrrhic victory. At the moment, they only had 50,000 people left in the Shajing region. Once he arrived, he would join forces with the Xuanfu division and have nearly 400,000 soldiers. At that time, even if each of them spit, they would be able to drown the 5-star army. The moment Xianxia led the army out of Xuanfu City, the informants of the city's Bureau of Security sent a telegram. Wang Shan held the telegram and appeared in front of Yang Qindong. Sixth young master, urgent telegram from the front. After reading the telegram, Yang Qindong's expression didn't change. He nodded and said, send a telegram to the person in charge of the security bureau of the capital. Tell him to contact our informants immediately and have them put pressure on Dai Zong. After arranging for Wang Shan to send the message, Yang Qindong ordered Beta Persei to call Tai Hu, the captain of the Wolf Fang Special Forces, and gave him a secret and important task. Sanbuchuan City became quiet again. While both sides were waiting for something to happen, they looked to each other peacefully. Inside the city, Shi Wanshan and the others were naturally preparing for war. The 5-star army outside the city began to reinforce the two cities, Jingzhou City and Shajing City. At the same time, they sent a telegram to Yang Si, the logistics division commander in Shiqing City, to prepare to immigrate 50,000 people to the two cities. At the same time, they also prepared enough military supplies to transport to the two cities. Yang Qindong's attitude showed that he had already treated Shaojing City and Jingzhou City as his own vegetable garden. He didn't take the hundreds of thousands of Baiming army in front of him seriously. It was as if victory was in his hands. Compared to the 5-star army, Shi Heng's reinforcements also progressed very quickly. In just 3 days, they left Terrace City and set foot on the fertile and desolate grassland. Not long after the 200,000 reinforcements left Talis City, news came from the vanguard that Shi Huanshan had sent people to receive them. At the same time, they also brought an important piece of news. It was news that the beginning city was very empty. Shi Heng, who was anxious to make a great contribution, didn't want to see these people at first. In his opinion, he was a dignified governor and Marquis Wuqing, who was personally conferred by the Baiming Emperor. If he did everything by himself, wouldn't it be too degrading? But when he heard the news about Shiqing City, he finally couldn't hold back the curiosity and excitement in his heart. He ordered the vanguard general to immediately bring the people to him. Half a day later, the people sent by Shi Huanshan came to Shi Heng's tent. In front of the big tent, a total of more than 10 people came to the rescue team. Only the captain was allowed to enter the big tent, and he had to be searched. The others could only guard outside the tent. From this point alone, it could be seen that the security was very tight. In fact, inside the main tent, there were 8 elite bodyguards led by Shi Heng to protect them. These 8 people were all warriors, 1 in 100. In a face-to-face situation, 5 or 6 people couldn't get close to them. They were the masters among the masters. The leader, who was the captain of the rescue team, was allowed to enter the main tent. When he entered, he knelt on the ground with a look of fear and trepidation. When he kowtowed, he didn't even find the right direction. He just kowtowed to a place where there was no one around. This very rash action first caused the 9 people in the tent to be stunned. Then, there was a burst of laughter. Obviously, everyone was so stimulated by the captain's action that they couldn't help laughing. The 8 bodyguards, who had their hands on their waist sabers, also relaxed their vigilance at this moment. How could such a cowardly person carry out an assassination? In the burst of laughter, Shi Heng, who was sitting on the high seat, shouted to the person kneeling below, "Marquis is here. Tell me, what is your name, what is your position, and what are you here for?" Oh. After hearing Shi Heng's voice, the person dared to raise his head and take a look. When he saw where Shi Heng was, he quickly lowered his head again. Then, he slowly got up and bowed his head to Shi Heng, saying, in reply to Marquis, "Everyone calls me Little Huzi. I am a centurion by Commander Shi's side. This time, I am here on orders from Commander Shi to tell Marquis a shocking news." Shi Heng didn't have any doubts about Huzi's words. The other party was wearing the Baiming army's uniform and was so timid. Such a person couldn't be a spy sent by others. Therefore, Shi Heng nodded and said, "Shocking news? But I don't know what it is that is worthy of the word shocking." "Marquis, Commander Shi said that after more than a month of defense, the first city is already an arrow at the end of its flight. This time, the first city is just an empty city. If Marquis can send troops there, you will definitely be able to settle it in one battle and make a great military achievement." When Huzi talked about the news, he was much more agile and seemed to be less nervous. Shi Heng listened to these words carefully and was not moved. He had already sent people to inquire about it. The first city's walls were high and strong. Even if it wasn't heavily guarded, as long as the city gate was heavily closed, it would be extremely difficult to take it down. Secondly, he didn't believe that Shi Huanshan, who was from the same family as him, would be so kind. Wasn't he worried that the 5-star army would take down Sanbuchuan City? Wasn't he worried about his own safety? A selfish person like Shi Heng naturally wouldn't believe that he would put himself in danger for the sake of others. Therefore, when he heard Huzi's words, he just sneered and said, "Your Commander Shi is really kind. Does he want our army to attack the first city and attract the attention of the 5-star army so that they can solve the siege? No, Marquis is thinking too much. Commander Shi said that Sanbuchuan city has long been prepared for defense. It will be very difficult for the 5-star army to take it down with their current strength. There's no need to worry about the safety there for the time being. On the other hand, if Marquis can take down the first city, it will be a great merit. As a support, my commander will also be honored. It will more or less reduce the loss of the army and the sin of not taking the opportunity to take down Shajing city and Jingzhou city. I just hope that after Marquis takes down the first city, he can put in some good words for the Xian Mansion army in front of the emperor. Huzi also lowered his head and said these. Logically speaking, these words were still somewhat reasonable. This time, when they went to the grassland, the Datong army naturally didn't perform well. The Xian Mansion army wasn't any better. Even if they waited for Shi Heng to bring reinforcements to solve the siege, they wouldn't get any credit. Since that was the case, it was better to take another path. For example, if they could take down the first city, it would definitely be a great merit. They could use their merits to make up for their mistakes and even be praised. After Shi Heng understood the reason behind it, his expression became better. Well, your commander's idea is good. It's just that the first city's walls are so tall, how can it be so easy to take down? If it can't be done in a short period of time and the main force of the 5-star army is attracted back, then wouldn't Marquis be attacked from two sides? That won't happen. My lord has already arranged spies in the first city. As long as the army arrives, the city gates will open from the inside. At that time, Marquis can lead the army in. I think with your 200,000 troops, once they enter the city, who can stop them? Huzi said repeatedly. Spy? Open the city gate? What's going on? At this moment, Shi Heng was really excited. If there was really such an arrangement, then he really had hoped to take down the first city. If that was the case, then he would definitely make a great contribution. At that time, it would be easy for him to be conferred the title of Duke. Shi Heng became excited, and Huzi also said with a look of fear and trepidation, how could such a secret be known by a small character like me? But my commander has already written a secret letter. His life must be handed over to Marquis personally. The letter is here, please take a look. Unknowingly, a secret letter appeared in Huzi's hand. Then, taking this opportunity, he took a few steps forward and was about to come in front of Shi Heng. Stop right there. A bodyguard standing at the side sternly shouted. He stepped forward bravely and blocked in front of Huzi. As a guard, he naturally wouldn't let anyone get close to his master without the permission of the Marquis. Huzi, who was stopped, didn't show any anger. Instead, he said with a face of fear, this is the commander's order. The letter must be handed over to Marquis personally. It's okay. There's no difference between handing it to the guard and handing it to Marquis. Shi Heng said indifferently. Then, the guard glared at Huzi angrily. Then, he grabbed the secret letter in Huzi's hand, turned around and bent down to pass the secret letter to Shi Heng, who was close at hand. Chapter 995. It was also at this time that the bodyguard turned around and bent over when he felt the weight on his waist lighten. The saber that he carried with him had disappeared. Before he could react, his waist was tightened again. Under the great force, he fell to the ground. Then, a figure replaced Shi Heng's position. An iron saber was placed on Shi Heng's neck. Of course, all this was done by Tiger. The so-called Tiger was the captain of the Lengia Special Forces, Tai Hu. This time, he was carrying out the beheading operation arranged by Yang Chendong. The difference was that he didn't mean to kill Shi Heng. As long as Shi Heng was willing to cooperate, everything would be fine. Otherwise, he would have to start a massacre. The iron sword was placed on Shi Heng's neck. Taihu's voice and behavior were completely different from before. He said calmly, "If you don't want to die, don't shout or move. Otherwise, this sword will not recognize you." As he spoke, Taihu purposely increased his strength. Immediately, the iron sword went into Shi Heng's neck, causing blood to flow out. Shi Heng was also a general on the battlefield, so he had some skills. Just as he was about to resist, he felt a killing intent wrap around his entire body. He finally knew that this person called Hu Zi wasn't just talking nonsense. He really had the intention to kill him. Most importantly, he felt that his every move was being watched by this person. No matter what he did, the iron sword would cut his throat first. In order to survive, he had to be obedient. Sensing that Shi Heng did not dare to struggle, Taihu let out a sigh of relief. He then said, "Tell your soldiers to retreat. At the same time, call in my brothers outside. Hurry up. If you're a bit slower, I'll kill you." I'll call. Shi Heng struggled as he spoke. Then, he said to one of the soldiers, "Quick, why aren't you following Hero Hu's instructions?" The 8 soldiers really wanted to take action. They believed that with their strength, they could definitely surround and kill this man called Tiger. However, they couldn't guarantee the safety of their general. At this moment, they could only listen to his orders and walk out of the tent. They let the dozen people that Taihu brought with him into the tent. Skinny Monkey, King Kong, Violent Ape, Silver Hand, Steel Leg and others quickly entered the main tent. When they saw that Taihu was holding Shi Heng hostage, they all laughed heartlessly. Iron Head is Iron Head. He completed the task cleanly and beautifully. It's admirable. As soon as they entered the tent, they acted as casually as if they were entering their own backyard. First, they looked around, then came to Shi Heng's side and surrounded him tightly. Although they were wearing the ordinary military uniform of the Northern Ming Army, King Kong and the others gave the 8 bodyguards a very dangerous feeling. Their movements seemed to be without order, but if you wanted to take the opportunity to make a move, you would find that they were on guard everywhere. This feeling told the 8 bodyguards that the dozen or so people who came in were experts among experts. Shi Heng completely lost the hope of escaping when he fell into the hands of Taihu and the other members of the Lengia Special Forces. He could only be manipulated by them. "Shi Heng, if you want to live, then cooperate with us. When the time comes, I can guarantee that I will spare your life. Otherwise, we'll fight to the death. It's just that we're just commoners, so if we die, we die. But Marquis Shi is different, there's still a bright future waiting for you. If you die like this, it's really a pity." Hearing Taihu's words, Shi Heng's face darkened, but he had to answer. "Well, Marquis has fallen into your hands. Of course, I'll accept it. But who are you and what are you doing here?" "I'm not afraid to tell you that we're the Lengia Special Forces under the command of the Duke of Zhongdan. Our mission is to behead senior officials like you." Taihu reported his identity. "The Duke of Zhongdan? You're the Duke of Zhongdan's subordinates?" "I'm Marquis Wuqing, who was conferred by the Emperor of Baiming. Aren't you afraid of the law by treating me like this? Aren't you afraid of being punished by the Emperor in the future?" After knowing the details of Taihu and others, Shi Heng pretended to be very angry and roared. He wanted to gain the initiative by striking first and oppressing people with reason, but Taihu didn't take him seriously at all. "Well, if you want to live, you'd better not shout. We're just carrying out our mission. As for the punishment of the Emperor, it has nothing to do with us." Taihu is right. Even if the Emperor wants to punish us, he has to find us first. Skinny Monkey, who liked to bicker the most, laughed. His voice attracted the laughter of the other team members. This was like a scholar meeting a soldier, it was hard to reason with him. For the officials, the Emperor was a great existence. But for the ordinary people, it was too far away. Especially for Taihu and others, they listened to Yang Chendong. As for the Emperor of Baiming, who was he? He couldn't reason with them, and he couldn't beat them. Shi Heng had to accept his fate and bow his head. He knew that if he wanted to live, he could only do as the other party asked. It's very simple. First, do two things. If you do them well, your life will be safe. Tai Hu saw that Shi Heng wanted to bow his head, so he immediately said. What are the two things? Shi Heng asked. First, immediately order the army to stop and set up camp. Second, write a letter to your emperor. Tell him that the 5-star army is too strong and that you are not their match. Tai Hu told him the mission that Yang Chendong had given him. Shi Heng paused for a moment, then shook his head and said, the army can stop. This is up to Marquis. But the matter of writing a memorial isn't that simple. We have a lot of soldiers, so there's no reason. You want a reason? Don't worry, there will be one soon. Yes, just wait for one night. Tai Hu seemed to have expected Shi Heng to say something, so he spoke at a steady pace. The main tent was thus controlled by Tai Hu and the others. What was worth mentioning was that the news of Shi Heng being threatened didn't spread. Perhaps it was because Marquis cared too much about his face. The 8 soldiers were ordered not to spread the news, so the matter was covered up. The 200,000 soldiers were originally ordered to quickly head to Sanbuchuan City. However, the order suddenly changed and they were told to stay where they were. Many of the generals couldn't understand. However, no one dared to disobey the military order. They could only find a place to stop. At the same time, the 100 Baiming's newly built red coat cannons also stopped. During the march, because these things were too heavy, they had been left behind. However, these things were very useful, so there were quite a few soldiers assigned to protect them. There were at least a few thousand people. It wasn't easy to kill their way through the heavy encirclement and get to the cannons. However, if they were to blow them up from afar, it would be much easier. Coincidentally, the order that Leng Wu received was to blow up these things. Since it was a mission given by the 6th young master, He Gong, as the commander, had to carry it out himself. He selected over 100 elite soldiers from Leng Wu and brought 4 rocket launchers to the Baiming army's encampment. 2 of the elite soldiers first knocked out 2 Baiming soldiers who were in charge of patrolling the night. After changing into their uniforms, they secretly placed a dozen or so bags of powerful explosives around the 100 red coat cannons. Then, under He Gong's command, the 4 rocket launchers shot out flames and blasted the bags of explosives. Flames rose into the sky and engulfed the red coat cannons. It was as if an earth dragon had been born. Shi Heng, who was resting on his desk, was shocked by the tremors. He sent out 2 soldiers to gather information. Soon, the news of all the red coat cannons being blown up came back. At this point, Shi Heng finally understood what Tai Hu's reason was. Sigh. With a sigh, Shi Heng started to write a memorial to the Daizong Emperor. The general content was that because the cannons were destroyed, there were no more powerful siege weapons. Also, considering that the leader of the 5-star army was the Duke of Loyal Ming, he didn't want to fight with them. Therefore, he asked the emperor to give the order to retreat. Baiming capital, Imperial Palace. The war in the northwest grassland had always affected Daizong Zhu Qiyu's heart. When he heard that the 200,000 soldiers of Datong had been defeated, he cursed angrily. Then, when he heard that the Xuanfu army was also implicated and trapped in Sanbuchuan City, he was so angry that he flipped over his desk. Fortunately, there was good news that Walla and Ili Kingdom were going to work together to attack the 5-star army. He suddenly felt like he was going to sit back and watch a fierce battle between tigers and dragons. The news from the front lines was that the Walla alliance had 300,000 soldiers and they were only going to deal with the 40,000 5-star army. At that time, Zhu Qiyu became worried. On the one hand, he hoped that the Walla alliance would succeed and eliminate Yang Chendong, eliminating his greatest threat. On the other hand, he didn't want the war to end too early. This was because once the Walla alliance became stronger, they would be a big threat to Beiming. Just like that, more than a month passed. News came from the front lines again. It was actually the 5-star army that won. Ili Kingdom was the first to return to their country, and then the Walla army was defeated. When this news came out, Zhu Qiyu sighed that Yang Chendong wasn't simple. At the same time, he also saw hope. That was to destroy the 5-star army while they were weakened. Not only would they be able to take down many important cities, but they would also be able to solve the problem in their hearts. Shiheng set out with the army. Zhu Qiyu was always waiting for good news. Finally, the governor and Marquis Wu Qingho's memorial came. He hurriedly opened it and saw that the contents were completely different from what he had imagined. After about half a cup of tea's time, Zhu Qiyu suddenly stood up and kicked the new desk to the ground. Then, he angrily shouted, "Trash, trash, a bunch of trash." This scene frightened the head eunuch Jining, who was serving at the side, so much so that she trembled with fear. It wasn't until he picked up Shiheng's memorial from the ground that he understood why the emperor was so angry. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.